Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paola Reyes. Nancy Paola Reyes Gorsi was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorsi, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Vilanova, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, the relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the U.S. in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the U.S., Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cádiz, the capital of the province of Cádiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andres Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's 2 younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but that she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers: Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state, unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th, using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorsey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy from the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid. He used the money he stole from Nancy to fund his daily bar hopping across various cities. The investigation and search for evidence and witnesses took nearly 2 years, and the trial did not begin until July 2022. In November 2022, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. His heart raced as he turned to see a nearby car coming to an abrupt stop. In the front seat sat a visibly pale and frightened woman, screaming hysterically, while the man beside her remained calm and composed. The man approached the car. Tension filled the air, ready to explode. Then, a deafening bang echoed through the morning, followed by a flash of light, like lightning tearing through silence. Thick smoke and fire obscured the sky. After what felt like an eternity, he came to his senses amid chaos. He saw a woman engulfed in flames, screaming in agony. Panicking, he grabbed a hose in a desperate attempt to douse the fire, but it continued to spread relentlessly. What was meant to be an ordinary day transformed into a nightmare where flames and fear dominated. What led them to this horrific scenario? When did normality morph into such tragedy? Hannah Clark was a vivacious 31-year-old woman who brought energy to everyone around her. Yet her fate took a dark turn, resulting in irreversible loss that shattered her life. She courageously faced off against a man whose name was once engraved in her heart, but paid an immense price for this confrontation. This tragic event occurred in Camp Hill, located in eastern Brisbane, Australia, a serene town where once vibrant life vanished abruptly, leaving behind only memories of its past vibrancy. Hannah Clark entered the world on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother to 3 children, 2 delightful girls and 1 spirited boy. However, her family faced challenging times. When Aaliyah, 6 years old, Liana, 4, and Trey was just 3, Hannah left an indelible impression of her warmth and cheerful disposition in the hearts of those who loved her. Her entire family remembers her as an exceptionally gentle and kind spirit with a radiant smile that could brighten any room. She dedicated herself entirely to her children, giving them everything they needed. Together with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player from the New Zealand Warriors, they raised their children. Despite a significant age gap between them, their relationship quickly grew deep and strong. Yet Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, never fully trusted Rowan. Hannah chose to ignore her mother's reservations about him. People around Rowan often spoke poorly of him. He had trouble remembering even his 4-digit bank card PIN and neglected to register his car after purchasing it, claiming no one had informed him about the necessity of such formalities. Hannah's parents were burdened with despair. Confronted with this difficult situation, they realized that interfering in Hannah's relationship with Rowan might lead to them losing their bond with her altogether. Their hearts were heavy, but they decided not to fight against it to preserve their cherished connection, the love and trust of their daughter. Sue had concerns about Rowan from the beginning. She sensed something amiss about him. He appeared arrogant and self-centered. The considerable age difference troubled her as well. When they met, Hannah had just graduated, while Rowan was already an adult at 31 years old. The fact that he hadn't finalized his divorce when they first began dating added to their worries. When presented with this situation upon meeting Rowan for the first time, Hannah's parents inquired about his ex-wife's circumstances. Rowan explained he still lived with her due to obligations towards his son. Eventually, though, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued pursuing a relationship with Hannah despite initial concerns from those closest to her. In 2011, he proposed to her, and Hannah yes. A year later, they married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia. They had 3 children together. The eldest daughter, Aaliyah, was quick-witted and inherited the best qualities from her mother, according to her grandmother's stories. Liana, the middle daughter, was a charming child who aspired to be the center of attention and always pleased those around her. The youngest child was Trey, perhaps the most beloved. Hannah adored him. He also showed athletic talent, which brought great joy to his parents who were involved in sports. Rowan was a former professional athlete who loved working out at the gym. He had impressive muscles, though their origin was not related to hard work, but to steroids use. This led to a mental disorder for him. Like Hannah, Rowan worked as a personal trainer, though their methods differed greatly. Clients loved Hannah for her kindness and caring nature. Because of this, she had many regular customers. Rowan's approach as a trainer was fundamentally different. His inappropriate and aggressive behavior caused by steroids made him unsuitable as a trainer. For example, he would call clients fat and clumsy on social media and often insult women during training sessions. Rowan faced difficulties in communicating with people, which affected his career and financial situation significantly. Hannah had to take on the role of breadwinner in the family. This only irritated Rowan even more because he felt humiliated that his wife was doing a better job than he was. Despite financial difficulties, they decided to open their own fitness club together. In between training sessions, they both worked part-time at a sports store, a decision made by Rowan so he could control Hannah's every move and know her whereabouts always. Their story is marked by contrast. While one shone through kindness and empathy, the other struggled with aggression and challenges in communication. However, his conduct in the store mirrored his behavior in the gyms where he previously worked. It seemed that Baxter consistently sought to display his superiority over women. During a personal training session with Sue, Hannah's mother, Rowan revealed a more malicious side. Instead of demonstrating the expected respect for the club owner and his mother-in-law, he acted inappropriately. During the session, Rowan deliberately caused Sue to fall. She struck her head on the floor and began to bleed. In such circumstances, any reasonable person would have apologized and promptly assisted her. But Rowan was different. He not only showed no empathy, but also laughed cynically at Sue and made sarcastic remarks about her clumsiness throughout the remainder of the training. Despite this incident and their own reservations, Hannah's parents endeavored to accept Rowan for their daughter's sake. Personal training sessions with Baxter became torturous for clients. Insults like fat and lazy were frequently directed at them. At home, his tyranny extended to Hannah and their children. Over time, his insults grew more cutting. He punished Hannah for any misbehavior, anything that displeased him. He forbade the children from seeing Sue, their grandmother, and prohibited Hannah from communicating with her brother. Hannah found herself isolated and severed from family and friends. Rowan exercised absolute control over her life, including taking away her clients and dictating who she could see and when. Gradually, she became akin to a prisoner within her own home. Each day, Rowan demanded intimacy from Hannah. Any refusal provoked his anger, which he then directed at her and the children. After coercing her into compliance, he would smile insincerely and offer a false apology, attributing it to an outburst of passion. In isolation and under constant control and cruelty, Hannah's spirit began to diminish. Rowan's tyranny was affecting both her life and those of her children adversely. The marriage that once thrived on love had devolved into a living nightmare for them all. Hannah lived under immense fear, imprisoned by unseen but potent bonds. Rowan, a tyrant and a brute, sought her obedience through threats and violence. His words pierced her heart like venomous thorns. "If you don't obey, I will hurt you." The specter of his wrath haunted the house, tainting each day. Hannah's environment was a cage of prohibitions put up by her husband. Wearing short shorts or bright colors, symbols of freedom and self-expression, was strictly forbidden to her. Rowan could not bear for his wife, whom he considered his property, to attract attention. He believed her place was in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Hannah did not dare to defy him. Any attempt at self-expression aroused his fury and rage. The insults and bullying extended beyond just Hannah. Rowan often directed undue harshness towards the children. While playful games among parents and children are common, Rowan frequently crossed all boundaries, inflicting intentional harm on them. When they cried out in pain, he mocked them, showing no regard for their feelings. Once, a playful fight with Aaliyah escalated into tragedy. Rowan miscalculated his strength and deliberately pushed the girl. She hit her head severely. The injury was deep enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of consoling his daughter and apologizing for his aggression, Rowan blamed Aaliyah. This wasn't the only form of torment he inflicted on his children. As an athlete accustomed to ice baths post-training, a standard regimen for adults, Rowan forced even little Trey to endure the icy water despite their pleas and tears. He even posted photos and videos of them on social media with captions like, "Even my kids take ice baths." Remarkably perceptive despite their youth, the children understood their predicament well. Aaliyah, the eldest daughter known for her quick wit and resilience, often argued with Rowan and tried to resist his tyranny. Whenever she overheard her parents arguing, she intervened in an effort to shield her mother from Rowan's ire. Feeling suffocated by Rowan's oppressive control, like a stranglehold on her soul, Hannah recognized that the toxic atmosphere was harming not just herself, but also the children profoundly. She decided to take a critical step. Confronting her husband head-on, despite knowing his cruel tendencies well, she understood that he might use the children against her in his ruthless mannerisms. Hannah did not believe he was capable of physically harming them. However, the fear of being denied the chance to see them tormented her greatly. She was a dedicated mother, willing to do anything for her children, yet she felt trapped. A single misstep could result in losing the most precious thing, the bond with her beloved children. In that same year, Hannah experienced a life-altering event. Rowan developed an interest in jiu-jitsu. One day, after returning from training fueled by adrenaline, he unexpectedly attacked Hannah. His hands tightened around her throat, and chilling words escaped his mouth. Overwhelmed by fear, Hannah did not immediately recognize herself as a victim of domestic violence. This assault was far more terrifying than anything she had previously endured. In the aftermath, Hannah resolved to leave Rowan Baxter at the earliest opportunity. When she contacted the police, she detailed the horrors she had endured. The responding officer informed her that coerced intimacy without consent constitutes domestic violence. This conversation was pivotal for Hannah. It opened her eyes and motivated her to take immediate action. She took her children and sought refuge at her parents' home, determined to escape the nightmare that shadowed them. By early November 2019, their relationship had not yet legally concluded in divorce. During this period, Hannah decided to allow Rowan some time with their children, despite having little control over the situation without court intervention. Nonetheless, she understood that trusting Rowan with the children was precarious at best. Rowan struggled with his emotions and perhaps sought solace by consulting Pastor Christopher Ans from his church. Christopher, known for his kindness and willingness to listen, provided Rowan with support and counsel during this challenging time. Over time, Christopher began to observe unsettling characteristics in Rowan. He noticed Rowan's desire for dominance and control. In moments of vulnerability, Rowan confided in Christopher, admitting his awareness of the illegality of his actions and his need for assistance. However, he had no idea how to remedy the situation. This confession marked the initial step towards reformation. Christopher's support and wise advice could have been beneficial on this challenging path, but it did not transpire. One day, Hannah and her children were walking quietly down the street when, without warning, a terrible event occurred. Rowan suddenly appeared, seized Liana, their middle daughter, and disappeared. Hannah's world fell apart. Intense anxiety and fear for her daughter's safety overwhelmed her. For 2 days, she was unable to locate Liana and had no knowledge of her whereabouts. The growing anxiety became unbearable torture. Eventually, Hannah sought assistance from the police. The officers conducted a thorough search and fortunately located Liana with her father. The girl was found alive and unharmed, although the experience left an indelible mark on her psyche. Recognizing the imminent danger to Hannah and her children, the police strongly recommended she file a formal report against him and obtain a protection order. However, Hannah, paralyzed by grief and fear, was not able to take this crucial step. Despite the numerous issues caused by Rowan, he was unfortunately still awarded joint custody of the children. This legal leverage enabled him to persist in his abuse of Hannah. Following another visitation with their father, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. Before departing, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying photographs of her in her underwear near his car, where their children could see them. Overcome with anger, Hannah tried to retrieve these photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and struck her in the face, resulting in a split lip. It remains unknown how severe this assault might have become if Sue, Hannah's mother, had not intervened promptly to assist her daughter. In response to intervention and shouting insults, Baxter drove away hastily. Hannah, gripped by shock and despair, went to the police because this attack clearly violated her protection order. Sadly, the authorities didn't act swiftly, which resulted in a heartbreaking tragedy. The day started out as usual and seemed like it would just be another working day. But there was an underlying sense of destiny. On February 19, 2020, clutching her car keys with hopes of a peaceful morning, Hannah left her parents' house to take her 3 children to school and kindergarten. Yet fate had other intentions. Minute by minute, moment by moment, disaster loomed over Hannah and her children's lives. Like a magnet, drawing them inescapably into darkness, they were pulled towards it. When Hannah got into the car with her children, Baxter unexpectedly climbed in as well. Fear gripped Hannah for herself and her children. She pleaded with Rowan to leave them alone, but his unchecked rage filled the air with threats and demands for Hannah to start driving. Not wanting to escalate the situation, she obeyed. As Hannah turned onto Raven Street, she noticed a man cleaning his car nearby. In what seemed an ordinary moment, fate took a sudden turn towards catastrophe. Desperate for vengeance, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the seat and doused Hannah and her children with it. Michael Zach was an accidental witness to this scene. He later recounted hearing the sound of a car pulling up to his house that morning. Panicked, Hannah screamed for help at him. She begged that Rowan wanted to kill her and had covered them all in gasoline. Rowan, holding tightly to Hannah, didn't let her go for a moment. His desperate cries for help got lost in a storm of silent madness. Michael approached the car from the passenger side and encountered a harrowing sight. Rowan's blank expression and the lighter he held. In an instant, flames engulfed the vehicle, a burst so intense it chilled the blood. Screams echoed, ears ringing, and then there was silence. The explosion left Michael stunned, disoriented, and pulled him out of reality itself. When he regained awareness, he was initially unsure of his surroundings or what had transpired. All around him lay chaos. The acrid smell of burnt metal and gasoline filled the air. Flames ravaged the car, reducing it to charred remains. Amazingly, Hannah managed to escape the blaze, scorched and bloody but alive. She screamed frantically, "My children! Where are my children?" Pleas for help poured out, not for herself, but for her children, still in danger within the burning inferno. As if answering her desperate cries, a passing car stopped. A doctor, off duty but compelled by conscience, rushed towards her. Upon reaching Hannah, he heard her anguished cry, "My children, they're there. Why didn't I stay with them?" That single phrase captured all her world's pain and despair. She was torn apart by regret and self-recrimination for surviving when her children did not. With professional composure and urgency, the doctor endeavored to assist amid the turmoil surrounding them both. Michael didn't hesitate for a second. Grabbing the hose at his house, he began pouring water over the burning car. The fire was ruthless, though. It consumed the entire vehicle with no hope of saving the children. Both the doctor and Michael started shouting for Hannah to duck and hide to put out the fire, but in her grief, she didn't hear them. "My children! Where are my children?" she cried out, her words filled with desperation and madness. In those first terrible moments after the explosion, Michael didn't notice the children inside. It was hard for him to believe Hannah would put them in such danger. Only later, when her screams finally made sense to him, did his heart fill with chilling horror. He raced toward the car to rescue them, but the flames were too fierce, the heat unbearable. All efforts were futile. Hannah lay on the road, her body scorched by fire, repeatedly saying, "My children, someone save my children." No one yet grasped the tragedy's full scale. Burns covered more than 97% of her body. Only her feet remained untouched, the only unaffected place on her severely burned body. Despite unimaginable pain, Hannah couldn't stop thinking about her unprotected children. Indeed, those who had always said Hannah was selfless were proven right. The police looked at her burned body and knew survival chances were slim. Yet, Hannah did not accept that fate easily. A courageous fire in her heart allowed her to summon every last bit of strength to give a testimony to police officers, a final gesture before facing an awful death. Officer Angus Kay wrote down every word she managed to say. Through pain and despair, she tried describing events that led up to her tragedy. Hannah, struggling to move her lips, identified her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the individual responsible and relayed all the details. Her voice grew softer by the minute, and her frail body weakened further. Officer Key stayed by her side throughout. He commended her for her bravery and reassured her that she had already contributed significantly and everything would be all right. His actions would later receive high praise from the authorities. His professionalism was crucial in gathering materials that became key to a verdict. Even in her final moments, Hannah didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about previous threats from Rowan, she denied any such instances. Doctors came to alleviate her pain, but she could no longer speak. Amidst all this chaos, Rowan Baxter behaved oddly. Despite burns covering 80% of his body, he exited the car on his own. While Hannah pleaded for her children's safety, he sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After some time, Rowan, seemingly possessed, climbed back into the car engulfed in flames. One of the bystanders, risking his own life, attempted to extinguish the fire at the rear of the vehicle. At that moment, Rowan retrieved a knife from inside the car and drove people away from it, preventing them from extinguishing the blaze. The children, trapped in a dire situation of steel and flames, had virtually no chance of survival. Nonetheless, onlookers did not cease their efforts to rescue them. Rowan's actions kept everyone at bay, effectively sentencing his children to a painful demise. What drove him? Was it a desperate attempt to shield them from an inevitable fate or an act of madness clouded by selfishness? One witness made an effort to reason with Rowan, pleading for him to drop the knife and allow a chance for the children's rescue. However, Rowan was unresponsive. As the children perished and Hannah succumbed before his eyes, Baxter turned the knife on himself. His selfish act eradicated any remaining hope for everyone involved. The children died. Hannah followed shortly thereafter, and Rowan's motives remained shrouded in mystery. At this tragic scene, a senior doctor noted Hannah's valor. Observing her wounds, which were clearly fatal, he saw only her concern for the children's welfare and a desire to convey the truth in her eyes. Hannah Clarke passed away at the hospital on the very same day of her admission. Only 31 years old, she was a tragic of severe domestic violence, along with her children. Despite facing immense danger, Hannah tirelessly fought to protect her family from an abusive individual. Her courageous efforts, although ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated her steadfast resolve. Each day, she exhibited remarkable bravery, putting her loved one's safety above all else. Through her relentless effort to confront her harrowing circumstances, she ensured that her story would endure. On March 9, 2020, Hannah was laid to rest alongside her children. This event deeply affected the Clarke family. In their grief, they decided to establish the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation with the mission of ending domestic violence in Australia. Just 4 days after this heart-wrenching event, thousands gathered to bid farewell to Hannah and her children. Hannah's memory will live on in Camp Hill through Hannah's House, where new trees were planted and a plaque installed recounting her life story. Through these initiatives and remembrances, Hannah's legacy persists for future generations to honor and remember. In December 2020, Hannah Clarke was recognized as the Woman of the Year by Marie Claire. This honor celebrated her courage in battling domestic violence. Yet her story continues beyond this recognition. Although Baxter is no longer alive, police have not closed the case. Their aim now is to delve into his motives to prevent similar tragic events from happening again. Those who knew Rowan describe him as egocentric and violent. Nicole, a friend of Hannah's, expressed her strong frustration. She spoke to the police, criticizing their inaction and negligence. Why wasn't help given to Hannah? Why were the children not saved? These questions remain unanswered for now, but one thing is evident. Rowan Baxter's selfishness led to a devastating tragedy. It left behind only grief and unresolved questions that will haunt many. Hannah's mother shared harrowing details of what her daughter suffered due to Baxter's influence. She recalled an incident at the gym where Rowan intentionally dropped Hannah on the floor, highlighting his aggressive nature further. A pastor who conversed with Baxter also noted his controlling tendencies and lack of empathy toward others. Pain. On January 26, 2020, investigators discovered a note left by Baxter just before the tragic incident. In this note, Baxter expressed that he considered himself a victim. He wrote, "I can't take this anymore. She must understand how hard it is to not have to see my own children. My life is ruined." Notably, Baxter signed the note on his own behalf and seemingly on behalf of the children. This detail underscores his perception of himself as a victim and his accusation against Hannah for ruining his life. The content of this note made Baxter's intentions evident. It appears he may have had plans to kidnap the children and retaliate against Hannah. During the court hearing, it was revealed that a week before the tragedy, on February 13, 2020, Hannah had alerted her friends about potential danger from Baxter. Her friend, Nicole Brooks, contacted the police on her behalf to warn them that Hannah and her children were at risk. Regrettably, the police did not take these concerns seriously, stating there was no specific threat they could act upon. Despite Nicole's persistent efforts, her warnings went unheeded. This situation exemplifies how inadequate laws to protect women from domestic violence can result in tragedy. Had stricter regulations been in place, perhaps the authorities could have responded more swiftly and effectively, potentially preventing the loss of Hannah and her children's lives. Brad Sickett came into this world on March 3, 1976, in the quaint town of Kingman, Kansas, USA. As the only child of Janet Sickett and her husband, whose name and details from his previous marriage remained strictly confidential, Brad had an interesting family dynamic. Janet had another son, Robert, from her previous marriage, making Robert Brad's older half-brother. The Seacott family had deep roots in law enforcement, resulting in a household characterized by strict discipline. Though information about Brad's childhood is scarce, it is documented that he attended high school in Kingman. Brad was tall and sturdy, traits that enabled him to pursue wrestling and bodybuilding during his high school years. His dedication to physical fitness soon paid off, as he excelled in various inter-school tournaments, often securing first place. This success turned him into a star wrestler and a notable figure within his school. At 16, while competing at a major wrestling event in the Kansas City Coliseum, Brad met a girl named Vashie Forrest. Born on March 21, 1977, in Argonne, Seward County, Vashie was Julie Hostler and Clinton Forrest's third child. She had an older brother named Rich and an older sister named Catherine. A younger sister named Tyler completed their family. Vashie possessed a noble spirit and enjoyed the affectionate support of her siblings, especially Catherine and Rich, who treated her with special care. In contrast, Julie wasn't particularly affectionate and often verbally abused her children. Despite these challenges at home, Vashie's outgoing personality earned her a large circle of friends. Though she received much love from those around her, Vashie struggled with self-esteem issues. She didn't feel beautiful or intelligent enough, and often sought approval from others. This quest for approval sometimes undermined her confidence. Nonetheless, Vashie became a cheerleader for her school's wrestling team, a role she loved passionately. She never missed any matches, which led to her fateful encounter with Brad at one such event. Brad immediately caught Vashie's eye. She was deeply attracted to him from their first meeting. He instantly asked her out, fascinated by his boldness. The girl yes, and they both felt it during that initial meeting. From then on, they became inseparable. After graduation, the girl went to the University of UO, and the guy honored his family traditions by joining the police academy. However, during this period, they spent less time together, which profoundly affected Brett, who was already starting to show signs of a controlling and irascible nature. His increasing jealousy eventually became too much for Vashie to handle. Tired and overwhelmed, she decided to end the relationship. The breakup was neither violent nor traumatic. Both went on with their lives. After graduating from the police academy, Brett joined the sheriff's department in Sedgwick County, just 50 kilometers from Kingman. Despite time passing and achieving career milestones, he couldn't forget Vashie. Deep down, he still loved her and never gave up the hope of reuniting with her. When an opportunity presented itself, he visited her and shared how regularly attending church had transformed him into a new man through his faith. Brett's words appeared sincere to Vashie, perhaps due to faith or genuine love, leading her to decide to return to him. Overjoyed by her decision, Brett didn't want any delays. He informed her family of his intentions and asked for her hand in marriage. Her parents, Julie and Clinton Forrest, were delighted by this news. They believed Brett and Vashie made a wonderful couple and anticipated a happy marriage. The wedding took place in 2004. Brett and Vashie settled in a peaceful neighborhood in Kingman, where they made new friends, including Monty Weldon, a friendly neighbor who frequently invited them to barbecues in his garden. It seemed like the perfect setting for establishing their new home. However, sometimes Vashie noticed that Brett's unpleasant side resurfaced sporadically. Problems cropped up repeatedly due to his dominant disposition. When Vashie became pregnant, though, these differences seemed to fade away temporarily. In fall 2006, their first son Brandon was born. 2 years later came another son named Bronson. The experience of recent parenthood brought about a realization for both of them. The inherent risks associated with Brett's job as a police officer required careful planning for their children's future welfare if one of them were ever absent. After thorough consideration and analysis of their situation, they chose guardianship arrangements for Brandon and Bronson should it ever become necessary. Brett's brother, Robert, worked as a trainer at the police facility in Vashie. Meanwhile, she dedicated herself fully to raising their children and managing household chores. In her spare moments, she penned down her feelings in a diary. Although Brett was a loving and devoted father, his behavior could be somewhat rough with the children during playtime, often treating them like adults. Even though Brett's violent tendencies appeared controlled, it seemed they were waiting to break free. One day at work, Brett used excessive force to subdue an inmate by slamming his head against a concrete wall. The victim sustained a fractured skull and brain damage and died a few days later. Brett faced a lawsuit for excessive use of force but received full support from his boss, Sheriff Gary Steve. The prosecutor's office and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation dismissed the complaint, clearing him of all charges. Brett did not show remorse. Instead, he admitted to colleagues that he enjoyed violence, especially when punishing those he deemed bad people. Later on, Brett and another officer forcibly subdued a defendant who had lost control and resisted removal from the courtroom for contempt of court. This action drew praise and resulted in both officers receiving a bronze medal from the sheriff for their meritorious behavior. Despite Vashi's love for her children, she still had career aspirations. Recognizing the emptiness she felt inside, she sought and secured employment as the new human resources manager at Vito's communications company. Brett took this development ambivalently. Ideally, he wanted his wife to focus solely on household duties and the education of their children, Brendan and Bronson. It wasn't long before he began to complain about Vashi spending too much time at work, a role he didn't accept her having in the first place. Consequently, their arguments increased significantly. For the sake of their children's well-being, Vashi made extensive efforts to mend their marriage, but felt it was all in vain. She had an intuition that this situation would end badly. With the aim of resolving their conflicts, Vashi and Brett began seeing Connie Sodman, a clinical social worker, during initial sessions. Vashi expressed feelings of profound loneliness and isolation, considering couples therapy as a potential last effort to salvage their marriage. However, when she broached the topic of divorce, Brett became extremely upset, resulting in weeks of psychological harassment. He threatened to kill her if she attempted to leave, claiming he could manipulate her death to appear as a suicide because of his position as a police officer. He even mentioned the possibility of burning down their home to destroy any evidence. In the days that followed, Brett had a one-on-one meeting with Kai, in which he declared furiously that if Vashi continued pursuing divorce, he would ensure she never saw their children, Brendan or Bronson, again. He further vowed that he wouldn't hesitate to take them out of the country. In early 2011, Brett transitioned from patrolling the streets to becoming a self-defense instructor at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Meanwhile, Vashi began feeling much better than she had in recent years. She continued therapy and implemented healthy changes such as exercising regularly and improving her diet. The decision to divorce gradually became more definite for Vashi. While she felt sadness about the end of her marriage, she predominantly experienced relief and optimism regarding her future. To enhance the effects of physical activity, she started taking an appetite suppressant, despite knowing it might have side effects like depression. Within a few months, Vashi's social life became very active. She expanded her contacts at work and met someone she found attractive. She confided in her older sister Kathleen about her fears concerning Brett's discovery of her plans due to potential repercussions. Vashi also spoke candidly with her coworkers about various threats from Brett. During this time, Brett discovered Vashi was keeping a personal diary without her knowledge and took it to his office to scan and print some pages. He spent considerable time researching information on suicides, fire-related injuries, homicides versus suicides, and their causes. In the first week of April 2011, Vashi attended a final individual session with Kai due to concerns about how Brett would respond upon receiving the divorce petition. Together, they developed a protection plan for herself and their children. When the man received the papers, Brett arrived at his office on the morning of 29th. To his surprise, he found an envelope containing divorce papers. After lunch, he discovered a projector in the pantry. He used it to project handwriting from Vasa's diary, traced it, and then wrote a goodbye note to his children. At same time, Brett printed out documents on how to kill a person and pass it off as suicide. He then asked the maintenance staff how best to dispose of computer hard drives. After researching their recommendations, Brett used a blowtorch to destroy them because they contained scanned images. Following this, he threw the waste into a dumpster. Later on, Brett drove to a convenience store and bought gasoline, which he loaded into his van. Several hours later, he pleaded with Vashti to let him spend the night at home to say goodbye to his children. The man promised to leave the next morning. Although they discussed joint finances, Brett again begged Vashti to change her mind about the divorce. However, when he saw she was determined to proceed, he soon renewed his threats. Exhausted from fruitless arguments, Vashti retired to her room to sleep while Brett stayed downstairs on the couch. Around 3:15 a.m., he went upstairs with a gun in his hand and shot Vashti in the neck. A neighbor who was awake watching television heard the shot, but did not pay much attention. Meanwhile, Brett placed the next to Vashti's lifeless body and staged the scene to fake a suicide. He then doused the hallway and bedroom with gasoline and took her cell phone, calling himself from it. Subsequently, he took Brendan and Bronson to a safe house. When everything was ready, he started the fire. The flames quickly engulfed the main room and caused cartridges still in the chamber of the gun to start firing. Neighbors woke up startled at around 3:45 a.m., initially thinking there was a shooting. By 3:57 a.m., 911 operators received a desperate call from Brett, who said that his wife had shot herself. When emergency responders arrived on scene, they found the first floor of the house burning with Brett outside in Vashti's car, along with his children. A police officer asked if anyone was in the house, and Brett replied that his wife was still inside. He further claimed that Vashti had shot herself due to depression, but had asked him beforehand to take their children somewhere safe. He stated that although he tried to save her, smoke and fire prevented him from doing so. When firefighters managed to control the flames, they found Vashti's body in the master bedroom. There on the bed, just below the body, investigators found a .44 caliber revolver with the barrel toward her feet and a 5-gallon container of gasoline lying in the middle of the bed. That morning, Brett called Kai and explained what had happened. He was upset and even expressed his guilt, noting that he felt responsible for bringing his wife to this tragic end. In front of his co-workers, he maintained his CB by repeating the same details he shared with investigators. 2 days later, officers discovered Vash's diary in her car. On the last page was a handwritten letter and suicide note taken in for forensic examination. The forensic report determined Vash died instantly from a gunshot wound to the head. She also sustained gunshot wounds to her torso and thigh. Blood and lung tests were negative for smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide, normally present in fire victims. The burns on her body prevented the examiner from concluding if it was homicide or suicide. Despite Brett's threats about committing a perfect crime making it look like suicide to avoid punishment, things didn't go as planned. Police soon noticed inconsistencies in Brett's story. For instance, there were no signs of dirt, blood, or wounds on him. Another inconsistency was the position of the gun with its barrel pointing downward. This raised questions about the alleged suicide. David Fetty, a special agent with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, questioned how the weapon ended up under the body. He confirmed that if Vash had shot herself in a horizontal position, the weapon would have fallen to the floor. If she had done it sitting up, it would have remained on the right side of the bed. Furthermore, the trajectory of the bullet did not support that Vash shot herself behind her right ear. Due to these discrepancies, David decided to dig deeper into the case. Further investigation led officers to discover documents detailing how to kill someone and make it look like suicide. While analyzing Vash's diary entry, they noticed a discrepancy in handwriting compared to her other entries. Forensic scientist Dennis McFarley concluded that the note was forged. Witnesses also reported seeing Brett destroying hard drives a day before Vash's death. Testimony from a neighbor indicated hearing a fatal gunshot at 3:15 a.m., 45 minutes before Bratt called 911. This confirmed David Fetty's suspicions about play. On May 13, 2011, police arrested Brad. He was charged with first-degree premeditated murder and 2 additional charges of endangering his sons. Brendan and Bronson were subsequently placed in the care of Kathleen. During questioning, Brad described Vashti as not being the cheerful and balanced woman she portrayed herself to be. On the contrary, she suffered from insecurity and depression due to their rocky marriage and threats he made about taking the children away. Brad also added that after filing for divorce, Vashti felt deep depression and remorse. Consequently, she set a fire and shot herself. Despite these claims, police didn't believe him. The trial commenced on June 10, 2013. During opening statements, Deputy Attorney General Amy Haley presented her perspective to the jury and argued that no one knows better than a police officer that fire destroys evidence. When questioned about a projector, Brad stated he had used it to demonstrate to cadets how to create a fake security scenario through a real-life exercise. A forensic document examiner testified regarding the forged letter and burnt hard drives. Concerning these items, Brad claimed he destroyed them to protect his personal information, not because he needed to hide anything illicit. His attorney, Roger Falk, mentioned that Vashti had suffered from depression since high school and that her condition worsened with diet drug use. Brad's brother Robert also testified in court and supported his brother's claims by confirming that he had observed Vashti feeling depressed and sad in the 2 weeks leading up to her death. In contrast, another witness informed the jury that while Vashti indeed suffered from depression at the start of therapy, it was mainly due to the circumstances of her marriage rather than a clinical mental health issue. Recently, she had been feeling anxious about her future. The account from Rich Vash's brother echoed this sentiment, recounting the emotional turmoil in his nephews' lives. Their innocence had been shattered by Brett, leaving them deprived of the chance to get to know their parents better. Prors portrayed Brett as manipulative, claiming he used his law enforcement experience to distort facts. In response, the defense stuck to its version of the alleged suicide, highlighting that even a seasoned medical examiner couldn't determine who was at fault for the victim's death. Brett, meanwhile, portrayed himself as a loving husband and devoted father, weighed down by his wife's desire to separate. He also accused Kingman County District Judge Larry Solomoto of seeking publicity and launched into a tirade accusing the judge of seeking a ruling against him to gain a nomination to the Kansas Supreme Court. In the end, the jury found Brett guilty of premeditated murder. Judge Larry sentenced him to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years and added 6 years for other charges because they would be tried consecutively. So, Brett will be eligible for parole after more than 31 years. Judge Larry also considered that Brett did not plead guilty and lied to avoid responsibility and showed no remorse. In 2015, Brett appealed his conviction, but the Kansas Supreme Court denied his appeal and upheld the original conviction. Brendan and Bronson's uncertain future initiated a custody battle between maternal and paternal families. Kathleen filed for custody on grounds that she had already cared for them for 102 days. As neither party could reach an agreement, the custody decision was left to the judge. However, it's important to note that there's been no news yet on the outcome of this custody battle. Megan Newton, born in 2001 to Michael and Sarah, also had a stepsister named Demi. However, Megan primarily spent her time alongside her mother Sarah, forging an incredibly tight-knit bond akin to best friends. Megan kept no secrets from her mother, while Sarah, in return, would often consult her daughter, who displayed wisdom beyond her years on various significant issues. The woman characterized her daughter as highly ambitious, dynamic, and affable. Megan's friends described her as someone with an excellent sense of humor, compassionate, and thoughtful. Her grandparents remarked that she possessed a golden heart from a young age, always prepared to lend a hand to others. In her elementary school days, Megan encountered a new classmate, a girl whose family had recently relocated to England from China. The girl faced significant challenges in understanding the curriculum and interacting with peers due to her lack of English proficiency. Consequently, the teacher placed her beside Newton, hoping the compassionate and helpful Megan would assist the newcomer. Megan embraced this role wholeheartedly, overcoming the language barrier to aid her classmate and adjusting to a new environment. By the time the girl moved back to China, she had achieved a respectable level of English proficiency. Megan's kindness and open-mindedness persisted into her teenage years and adulthood, finding expression in her passion for sports. Soccer, in particular, captured her heart, leading her to join the Stoke-on-Trent women's soccer team. Additionally, she engaged in coaching, dedicating her weekends to training young girls under 7 years old instead of resting, striving for her Level 1 coaching badge. Megan aspired to secure a sports scholarship in the USA. Her commitment to sports, especially soccer, was so profound that she chose to pursue a career in it, even getting a small tattoo of a soccer cleat to express her love for the game. Upon completing her schooling, Megan embarked on her college journey, aiming to pursue her passion further. Megan Newton, a promising student aspiring to become a sports therapist or physiotherapist, was the first in her family to attend a tertiary education institution. Despite her potential for a bright future, her dreams were tragically cut short in the spring of 2019. Megan led a busy life, balancing 3 part-time jobs. On April 19th, a seemingly ordinary day, she finished work at a local fish and chip shop and headed home around 10:20 p.m. Living independently in her own apartment, Megan enjoyed her newfound autonomy. After getting ready, she joined friends for a night out at a club in Hanley, where they danced and had drinks. By Saturday morning, a grim discovery was made in her apartment: Megan's lifeless body, naked and covered in blood, a victim of a brutal stabbing. This horrific event deeply affected the community, who remembered Megan as a vibrant and charming young woman. The apartment paperwork and IDs conclusively identified the deceased as Megan Newton, a young woman who was brutally murdered in her bedroom. Megan's family was promptly notified by the police upon their arrival, and they had to face the heartbreaking task of identifying their daughter at the morgue. Megan, whom they had cared for with great love and recently allowed to live independently, met a tragic end that they never could have imagined, even in their worst nightmares. The crime scene was immediately secured, and forensic experts were sent to Megan's apartment to collect any potential evidence. The autopsy revealed the horrifying extent of the attack on Megan. She was strangled first, losing consciousness due to the lack of oxygen, and then she received 9 stab wounds to her back that punctured both her lungs. Furthermore, it was clear that she had been sexually assaulted. The murder weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Megan, was found nearby. The forensic pathologist concluded that it was these stab wounds that led to Megan Newton's untimely death. The bloodied knife and apartment keys were sent to the lab in the hope that DNA analysis could identify the assailant. It was believed that the culprit had accidentally dropped the keys while leaving Megan's apartment after the murder. The investigation began with detectives reconstructing the events leading up the tragic incident by talking to Megan's friends and family. It was determined that Megan had spent the evening at a club before taking a taxi home in the early hours of the morning. The investigative team reviewed surveillance footage from the area around the nightclub and the route Megan took to get home. Effort to trace her final movements and possibly pinpoint the assailant drew their attention to footage showing Megan boarding a taxi accompanied by a friend and an unidentified young man, raising questions about this individual's identity and potential role in the crime. Subsequent video from within Megan's apartment complex showed the same young man again, this time within the premises. Luckily, a camera positioned in the common hallway offered a clear view of the entrance to Megan's apartment, allowing officers to monitor who came and went that night. The goal was to identify the murderer by scrutinizing the video recordings from the evening of the incident. At approximately 3:44 a.m., Megan was seen entering her apartment building's lobby with the same young man she had shared a taxi ride with around an hour before. They proceeded together towards her apartment, with Megan appearing cheerful and exhibiting no signs of apprehension or unease around the individual. Upon reaching her door, Megan used her keys to unlock it, and they both went inside. However, a particular moment caught the detective's attention. While Megan was unlocking the door, the young man stood behind her, scanning the area and even making eye contact with the camera lens at one point. This behavior immediately raised suspicions among the police. They pondered whether the young man had premeditated harming Megan, possibly after coercing her into sexual acts, and was checking for potential witnesses. Further scrutiny of the video footage from the remainder of the night revealed a disturbing fact. Only the young man exited the apartment the following morning around 5:54 a.m. He attempted to leave the building but realized he needed a special key fob to do so. He returned to Megan's apartment, momentarily retrieved the keys, and eventually managed to exit the building. The external surveillance captured him discarding an object where the blood-stained apartment keys would later be discovered by a neighbor. The most damning evidence of his involvement in Megan's death was obtained from another surveillance camera, which showed him walking away from the scene, inspecting one of his hands that appeared to be covered in blood. This critical piece of evidence marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. Identifying the young man as Joseph Trevor was swift due to a recent run-in with the law just the day before the tragic event. He had been arrested for possessing ketamine, a substance used both medically and in veterinary settings as an anesthetic and sometimes for pain management. The police officer who had apprehended Trevor immediately recognized him in the surveillance footage. Trevor, 18, hailed from a reputable family deeply rooted in the law enforcement community, with both his father and mother serving as police officers. He resided in a neighboring district and had a long-standing acquaintance with Megan Newton, as they had been high school classmates. Joseph led a seemingly typical life. He was academically successful and shared Megan's passion for sports, excelling in soccer to the extent of playing professionally for Newcastle Town and securing a sports scholarship in America with plans to relocate there after completing his studies. Like Megan, Joseph was pursuing higher education in Newcastle, poised for a promising future. To many who knew him, Trevor was perceived as a kind, affable, and sociable individual. Yet he harbored a less visible, volatile side to his character, capable of shifting from a jovial and engaging demeanor to one that was reclusive, brusque, and abrupt without any discernible trigger. This unpredictability left acquaintances unsure of which version of Joseph they would encounter on any given day. When the detectives in the Megan Newton case began to look more closely at Trevor's background, they came across some very unpleasant information about his past. Approximately 3 years earlier, at age 15, he was suspected of abusing another teenage girl because the attempt at intimate contact failed. He was not charged or punished. However, everyone around the school knew about the incident. After this incident, classmates at the school began to call Trevor a predator and child molester since the public arrest at the school could not go unnoticed. Now, for the police, this information became a warning because Megan was also subjected to forced sexual intercourse that night. Joseph Trevor was identified as the primary suspect in the assault case. Investigators focused on his movements that night. They already knew from surveillance footage that he was near the nightclub and got into the same taxi as Megan, later heading to her apartment with her. Detectives were unsure what Joseph Trevor did before arriving at Newton's home. They discovered that Joseph attended a party with school friends the previous evening. Coincidentally, they ended up in the same bar as Newton. Since they knew each other from school, they greeted each other and continued to enjoy their time separately. However, Joseph didn't stay long at the nightclub. Security noticed he had a packet of white powder and called the police. The squad that arrived detained Joseph and took him to the nearby police department. Despite his parents being in law enforcement, Joseph faced no legal repercussions. The officers unlocked his cuffs, seized the ketamine, and let him go, advising him to return home and avoid further drug use. Ignoring their advice, Joseph returned to the club where Megan was. He was denied entry, and around 2:40 a.m., he met Megan by the taxi queue. He shared his recent ordeal at the police station and his concern about facing his parents. Megan, always compassionate, let Joseph borrow her phone to contact a friend, but he couldn't find a place to stay. Seeing his distress, Megan invited Joseph to stay on her living room sofa. In the morning, once sober, he could decide how to approach his parents. Trevor gratefully agreed to Megan's offer, which explains why surveillance footage showed him entering a cab with Megan and her companion. He messaged his dad, falsely claiming he'd spend the night at a friend's place. The cab first dropped off Megan's companion before taking Megan and Trevor to her apartment on Fletcher Road. Surveillance recorded them entering the building and later captured Trevor discarding stained keys in the yard. Authorities believe that during those few hours, Trevor violently assaulted Megan, leading to her death. The evidence was clear, leaving Trevor with no way to dispute the accusations. Law enforcement was ready to apprehend him, and astonishingly, Trevor had already informed his parents about his role in Megan's death. After leaving the apartment just before dawn, Trevor went to a bridge over the A500 in Stoke-on-Trent. Sitting on the barrier with his legs hanging over, he seemed to be considering jumping. He perhaps sought an escape from the consequences of his deeds, contemplating suicide. Trevor had a history of depression and prior suicide attempts and had been seen on this bridge before. A bystander noticed Trevor and promptly alerted the authorities. They arrived quickly and transported him to the hospital for a psychiatric assessment. After evaluation, medical professionals deemed it safe for him to be discharged, and he returned home under the watchful eye of his father. Joseph revealed the whole truth to his mother. He could no longer carry the weight of his actions and was wary of the inevitable consequences of his deeds. After gathering his thoughts, he approached his mother and confessed his involvement in Megan Newton's death with the simple statement, "I did something bad." He also shared these confessions with a few of his friends, possibly driven by or other emotions, to admit to actions that couldn't be undone. Once Joseph's mother heard his admission, she quickly contacted the authorities to report his confession. However, by that time, the investigative team had already identified Joseph Trevor as their prime suspect through surveillance footage and were coordinating his arrest. The young man was taken to the police station for questioning, where he acknowledged being at Megan's residence that night, but couldn't provide details about the brutal attack. His account was consistent with surveillance footage showing their entry into her apartment. She had kindly offered him the couch for the night. Trevor claimed that their physical interaction was consensual and that after their intimacy, he blacked out. He had no memory of the subsequent events and couldn't clarify the specifics of the incident or his motivations. The only memory he retained from that night was Megan's apology. At 15, Trevor had also faced allegations of harassing a peer. He was ridiculed by his classmates, who labeled him with various derogatory terms. Some branded him a predator and charmer, and among them, Newton allegedly tagged him as Rolf Harris. According to Trevor's account, Ralph Harris, a famed Australian TV host, musician, and painter, was convicted of child abuse and other sexual offenses. These monikers deeply wounded Joseph throughout his youth. He endeavored to erase these bitter memories. Over time, Megan's apology for the schoolyard taunts abruptly revived these painful recollections, propelling him into a fit of anger. In that instant, he purportedly seized a knife. Nonetheless, the detectives dismissed his account, skeptical of his conveniently lapsing memory at a pivotal juncture. The law enforcement officers were persuaded that he was fully cognizant of his actions throughout. It's likely that Megan merely turned him away that evening. She offered him a place to stay out of friendship, recognizing his troublesome situation. Having known each other for years, Attending the same school and now the same college, they shared numerous interests and aspirations for the future. Their mutual enthusiasm for soccer might have led her to believe it was safe to share her space with him overnight. Upon returning to the apartment, Joseph attempted to escalate their interaction to a more intimate level. Megan was not receptive and declined. This deeply frustrated Trevor, especially under the influence of alcohol and drugs. Disregarding her objections, he chose to use force in an effort to eliminate the risk of her reporting the incident. He decided to take drastic measures to ensure her silence permanently. Shortly after Megan Newton's tragic passing, Joseph Trevor faced charges for intentionally ending the life of his fellow student, along with committing 2 acts of sexual violence. The assault was discovered to have occurred in a manner involving multiple attacks. He was apprehended at his residence, and after several months the legal proceedings commenced, despite his initial partial admission. Joseph first refused to admit guilt, but later he changed his story. He acknowledged causing Megan's death, though he insisted the relations that night were consensual. He maintained this stance until the trial commenced on February 17, 2020. At the start of trial, he suddenly shifted his plea to guilty on all counts. This move seemed aimed at avoiding a lengthy trial, perhaps expecting that the jury would quickly dismiss his defense. As a result, Joseph received a life imprisonment sentence with eligibility for parole after a minimum of 21 years and 65 days. A dramatic moment unfolded in court when Trevor, during sentencing's conclusion, turned towards Sarah, Megan's mother, and silently mouthed, "Sorry." This action deeply infuriated her. Apologies at this juncture were meaningless and could neither amend the past nor alleviate the prolonged suffering Megan's family endured while awaiting trial. His belated apology appeared as an additional insult to the grieving mother. No apology could bring back Sarah's daughter or negate Joseph's heinous actions that night. The indifference Trevor displayed in surveillance footage post-incident, showing him nonchalantly leaving Megan's residence, underscored his lack of remorse. The irreversible harm inflicted on Megan and her family robbed them of future joys and milestones, leaving them burdened with lifelong sorrow. Megan's closest friend, Ricardo Eccles, shared that they had plans to shop in Manchester the day after her passing. He was heartbroken upon learning of his friend's sudden loss and spent days in shock. However, in honor of Megan, he gathered himself and initiated a fundraising effort to assist with Newton family's funeral costs. His efforts successfully raised several thousand British pounds, which were handed over to Megan's mother. Megan had always been a pillar of support for those in distress. Now it was time for her supporters to reciprocate by providing emotional support and assistance to her family and all who cherished her brief yet impactful life. A fervent supporter of Stoke City Football Club, Megan was remembered by the team's players and passionate supporters who dedicated a minute of applause during a game in her honor. Her family and friends also collected funds to set up a commemorative bench in her memory at a serene park in Stoke-on-Trent. This bench overlooks a scenic pond and playground suitable for football, a tribute fitting for someone so interconnected with her community and beloved by all who knew her. Georgina Kruger was born on April 11, 1992 in Munich. Georgina, often called Jorodzina, was the middle child in a simple household. She had an older brother named Tommy, who was 8 years her senior, and a younger sister named Michelle, who was 2.5 years younger. When Jorodzina turned 11, her parents decided to divorce. Tommy then chose to live with their father at age 19. After the separation, Jorodzina and Michelle were primarily raised by their mother, Vesna, and maternal grandmother. Both girls excelled academically and participated in music and dance activities, displaying distinct creativity. The family lived modestly. Although their father stayed in touch with his ex-wife and daughters, his focus largely remained on supporting his elder son through educational pursuits and other endeavors. In June 2006, Vesna relocated with her mother and daughters to Berlin after securing a well-paying job there. They moved into Moabit district at house number 8 on Stendal Street. On September 1st that year, Both sisters enrolled at one of the best local schools, accessible by bus, despite being situated in another district. Vzna adapted well to her new job and had ambitious plans for their future until unforeseen events disrupted their peaceful existence abruptly. From an early age, Jorodzina harbored a dream of becoming an actress. She loved to sing and dance, dedicating herself wholeheartedly and taking these pursuits very seriously. Inspired by Indian films, she envisioned a career in acting and enthusiastically participated in school theater, attending acting and stage speech courses. Her teachers recognized her talent, forecasting future success and fame for her. Furthermore, Jorodzina possessed a bright, expressive appearance, characterized by a slender feminine figure and notable height for her age. She meticulously cared for herself, keeping abreast of fashion trends and striving to dress stylishly. Jorodzina skillfully applied decorative cosmetics, remarkably well, akin to professional makeup artists. Often back in Munich, she would apply makeup for friends and neighbors with precision. During the summer holidays in Berlin, Jorodzina actively attended various casting calls in attempts to make her breakthrough onto the big screen or television. Though she managed to appear in crowd scenes several times, these roles were quite minor. However, on Friday, September 22, 2006, fortune finally favored her. Jorodzina auditioned for a guest role in the television series Turkish for Beginners, and her candidacy was approved. She was scheduled to receive a callback on Monday, September 25th, to finalize her inclusion in the cast. This callback was set to discuss further details and extend an invitation for contract signing. Jorodzina, the new beauty in town, made a noticeable impact from her very first day at her new school. She immediately captured the attention of all the boys her class. However, when it came to interacting with the girls, she faced significant challenges. They openly envied her and saw her as a competitor. As a result, her classmates were slow to welcome her into their group and often communicated with her reluctantly. Despite these obstacles, Jorodzina remained sociable, friendly, and approachable. She avoided conflicts and tried hard to interact with everyone in the class. This teenage girl wasn't just beautiful. She danced well, sang wonderfully, and even received an offer from a modeling agency to become a photo model. She agreed to the offer, but unfortunately missed the planned photo session scheduled for early October. Jorodzina harbored dreams of making it big in Hollywood or Bollywood one day. She envisioned herself walking on the red carpets of prestigious film festivals amidst celebrities, dreaming of fame, recognition, and film awards. To achieve these aspirations, she was prepared to work diligently on herself. Just as these dreams seemed within reach, Jorodzina suddenly disappeared without a trace a few miles from home. At that time, she was awaiting confirmation for a role in a TV series and had no doubts about securing it. Throughout that weekend, Jorodzina could think of nothing else but the anticipated call from the studio that would decide her future. She was filled with excitement and inspiration, already imagining herself on set, preparing for her lines. On Monday morning, September 25th, as usual, she headed to school. She was expected back home by 2 p.m., and since the call was expected later that afternoon, Jorodzina asked her grandmother to answer all calls in her absence. The day felt endlessly long for Kruger. Jorodzina's classmates noticed she kept checking the time and seemed unable to focus on her lessons. Given that she had told no one about her casting opportunity, everyone interpreted her anxious state differently. After school ended for the day, Jorodzina gathered her belongings swiftly and rushed to the nearest bus stop. She boarded bus number 27, which she rode daily, and headed towards home. After traveling 3 stops, she got off at Rue Rov, not far from where she lived. Jorodzina Kruger never made it home. Vanishing somewhere halfway from the bus stop to her apartment, she was never seen again, neither alive nor deceased. By 2 in the afternoon, her grandmother, who was waiting for Jorodzina and her sister, had prepared lunch and set the table. Jorodzina was expected first, with Michelle arriving a bit later due to extra classes at music school. It was strange when Jorodzina did not show up because she had no plans to stay out. When Michelle arrived home at 3, The grandmother grew anxious and began calling Georgina, only to find her phone turned off. Subsequent attempts also failed. Anxiety grew further as more time passed. When Georgina's mother returned from work and learned about her daughter's disappearance and unreachable mobile phone, she immediately sensed that something serious had occurred. The first step was contacting the school, where it was confirmed that Georgina had attended all her classes and left by bus as usual. The mother then reached out to several of Georgina's friends, hoping that she might have been delayed talking or stopping at a cafe on her way home. However, all friends confirmed that Georgina appeared in a hurry and headed straight home. Increasingly concerned, they proceeded to the police station and reported the disappearance of the 14-year-old girl. Initially skeptical, law enforcement suspected that Georgina might have gone on a date or visited friends or perhaps argued with a classmate and was sulking alone somewhere. Exhausting all possible scenarios and verifying that the teenager wasn't found in any anticipated locations, detectives then began checking accident reports and calling hospitals, assuming she might have encountered trouble on her way home from school. Yet there were no hospital records for Georgina either. As night approached, extensive searches and witness interviews commenced. It turned out that the last sighting of Georgina was at the bus stop. When she got off the bus and turned the street leading to her home, the schoolgirl was dressed in blue jeans with wear marks, a light blue t-shirt, a denim jacket, and gray sneakers. She carried a pink sports bag with a long, wide strap containing her notebooks, textbooks, and mobile phone. Investigators tracked the girl's movements through her device's signal. She spent the entire day at school, then boarded the bus and got off at her stop. However, approximately halfway to her home, the signal suddenly vanished and never reappeared. The search began on Stendhal Street, where the Kruger family lived. A search team with dogs trained to detect both living and deceased humans was dispatched there. At that point, there was still hope of finding the teenage girl alive and unharmed. Law enforcement checked every home, interviewed all residents and potential witnesses, inspected attics and basements, and spoke with workers at local stores and cafes. No one had seen Georgina. Even dogs couldn't pick up her trail. By the next morning, flyers with the schoolgirl's photo and requests for any information about her were posted all over the city. Dozens of calls came into the police station, reporting sightings of a similarly looking girl in different parts of the city. Unfortunately, all leads turned out to be false. Investigators also began to follow up on all previously convicted local residents, as well as those released on bail. Special attention was given to criminals who had shown an unhealthy interest in minors. However, all these efforts yielded no results. The schoolgirl seemed to have vanished into thin air, not making it home. No traces or personal belongings found, as if she had never existed at all. After several months of fruitless searching, the investigation was suspended due to lack of leads, not a single clue, and no direction left to pursue. About a year after Georgina disappeared, someone called the police anonymously. The caller said her body was at the bottom of a nearby lake. Law enforcement couldn't figure out who made the call, but they decided to check it out anyway. For weeks, skilled divers went through the lake with advanced equipment. They were thorough, examining almost every inch of the lake bed. They found nothing. It was a false lead. Despite this, it got the public interested in the case again. The media began discussing and writing about Georgina's disappearance once more. So another search operation was set up. The police talked to neighbors again and brought in search dogs, although hopes were low since the dogs had not picked up her scent on the day she vanished. A year later, investigators were fairly sure Georgina was no longer alive. However, her family didn't believe it. Her mother made up a story for herself that her daughter had run away to India and was now in Bollywood films, dancing and singing as she always wanted to. These thoughts comforted her mother and helped her carry on for the sake of her younger daughter. Efforts to find Georgina resumed from time to time. In 2016, nearly 10 years after she vanished, a resident of Stendal Street contacted police about a troubling neighbor who invited underage girls over regularly. This neighbor was a 35-year-old Turkish immigrant named Ali K. Publicly, Ali K appeared to be an exemplary family man. He was married and raising 3 kids. But closer investigation worried police officers as they delved into his background and personality. 4 years earlier, he had already been under suspicion and investigated by authorities due to concerning behavior patterns. At that time, he deceitfully lured a local schoolgirl by promising to sell her a trendy smartphone at a symbolic price. He took the girl to his storeroom, located in the basement of the apartment building. There, he struck her on the head and coerced her into intimate closeness. Afterward, he made the teenager swear she wouldn't tell anyone about what happened. He then her a paper napkin to wipe her tears and helped her tidy up before leaving. The girl promised to remain silent, just to escape from his clutches. But as soon as she was free, she immediately told her parents about the incident, and together, they went to the police to report the violent actions. The schoolgirl detailed the man's storeroom in the basement, noting that it looked more like a maniac's den. Ali was arrested that same day, but vehemently denied his guilt and shared his own version of the events. According to him, he was indeed selling the gadget, and the girl herself expressed a desire to buy it. As the smartphone was in his basement storeroom, they went down together. When the guest examined the device, she said that she had always dreamed of such a gadget, but since she didn't have the money, she was ready to pay in another way. Following this, according to Ali, the girl began kissing him and started undressing. He tried reasoning with her, but ended up pushing her away forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head. This explained the injury and bruises on her body. However, the fact of intimate closeness could not be proven, as Ali had used a contraceptive, which he later disposed of. Ali's wife Melik fully supported her husband and also began accusing the girl of indecent behavior and attempts to seduce her husband. Ultimately, Ali received only a suspended sentence for causing moderate bodily harm. Nonetheless, as soon as the police took up investigation into the disappearance of Kruger again, they decided to check him thoroughly once more. Ali K did not have a permanent job and got by on odd jobs, mainly living on benefits. He loved gambling and often incurred debts. Being a regular visitor at a Turkish coffee shop on the ground floor of his building allowed him to make acquaintances who treated him to food and drinks. Despite his precarious lifestyle, Ali carefully maintained his appearance, desperately trying to look younger than his years, wearing fashionable clothes even if it meant spending children's benefits on them. The main oddity about Ali K was his attraction to young girls, which raised several flags during this renewed investigation into Kruger's disappearance. To ensure that the suspect wouldn't become suspicious and would feel secure, a special agent codenamed Hakan was prepared and sent in. He posed as a successful businessman who had recently moved to the Moabit area to open a car service station. A few times, he visited the cafe in Ali's building, loudly discussing business plans and details with a partner. As they left, the partner mentioned the need to find a manager soon, noting that it was a well-paying position and that it was important to choose wisely. After these words, the second man left, while Hakan stayed to finish his coffee. Suddenly, Ali approached and sat at his table. He immediately offered himself for the manager position. A conversation ensued, which quickly turned into a casual chat. The businessman noted that Ali might fit the role and then mentioned the salary. Ali's eyes lit up at the figure. He began dreaming of paying off his debts and buying the sports car he had always wanted. The men exchanged phone numbers, and from that day on, they began communicating regularly. Their relationship quickly grew into a friendship. Hakan even started taking Ali on business trips to other cities, aiming to get closer to him and gain his trust. But this friendship had an unexpected effect. As the suspect tried to appear as the best version of himself to his prospective employer, he boasted of his achievements, even minor ones, and preferred to stay silent about any wrongful acts. Several months later, Realizing that the case was not progressing, the investigation decided to introduce another agent, this time a woman who would play Hakan's girlfriend. This introduced Susan into the scenario. Her goal was to befriend Ali's wife Melik and try uncover any secrets her husband might be keeping. It only took a few meetings for them all to get along well, after which all four started socializing as families. Melik was sociable, but regarded her husband as nearly a saint. For years, she had turned a blind eye to his infidelities, did not believe the schoolgirl who accused him of violence, and remained convinced her husband was simply unlucky with jobs, despite being a very good person in her eyes. But now, everything would change soon. Susan realized that Ali's wife wasn't just covering for him. She truly believed he was incapable of harming. The agents decided to use a trick by spreading a rumor that progress had been made in the Crew case, and an unnamed source had indicated where to find her body. Hakan left a newspaper with this article in his car, which Ali had started borrowing occasionally. Several cameras and recording devices were also installed in this car. When the suspect and his wife got into the car, she soon noticed the newspaper left behind, quickly skimmed the article, showed a bit of surprise that the case was still being investigated, and then, indifferently, put the paper aside. It became clear that Melik knew nothing about this. Otherwise, she would have inadvertently revealed herself. 6 months later, the investigation finally concluded that their plan had failed. The K family had become friends with the agents, even trusting them to look after their children. But no confessions were forthcoming. Ali strived to appear honest and upright, and his wife was simply unaware of the crime her husband had committed. Maintaining their cover was becoming increasingly expensive. They even had to lease a space for the supposed auto repair shop and sign a sham employment contract with Ali to avoid raising his suspicions. The investigation then took a desperate last step by introducing another agent who would play a villainous role. According to the backstory, his name was Kor. He was Hakan's cousin, had a criminal record, and was running some underground business. The hope was that Ali, meeting a kindred spirit, would open up and confess his sins. The men quickly bonded over their shared interests. Kor treated his new friend to drinks, and together they visited various clubs and houses of ill repute. The new friend confessed that he made money through not entirely legal means and thus wanted to spend it indulgently, with Ali willingly helping him in this endeavor. Simultaneously, Kor constantly complained about his girlfriend, with whom he supposedly could not break up because she was blackmailing him and threatening to report his illegal business to the police. According to him, she was constantly demanding money, and her needs were growing. One day, while having drinks with a friend, Kor declared that he intended to rid himself of the bothersome blackmailing girlfriend in a radical way and was willing to pay 100,000 euros to anyone who would do the work. Ali perked up at this and offered to take on the task himself. His friend agreed but suggested they discuss the details in a secluded place when sober. In November 2017, during a monstrous confession while sitting in a car, the men discussed the plan to eliminate Kor's nuisance girlfriend. At one point, Kor doubted whether Ali was capable of taking a life. In response, Ali revealed something he claimed no one else knew. He confessed that more than 11 years ago, he had taken someone's life with his bare hands. Ali stated that in 2006, a stunning young girl had moved onto his street and completely captivated him. She passed by his house twice a day on her way to and from school, so he memorized her schedule and would step out to greet her and pay compliments. Despite her young age, he described her as attractive and felt intense desire for her. One warm September day, when the girl was returning from school and the street was unusually quiet and deserted, Ali saw his chance. He asked a neighbor girl to help him move some items from his storage area, and she kindly agreed, not sensing any danger. Once they were in the basement, he locked the door and tried to kiss the schoolgirl who struggled and screamed. He then knocked her unconscious with a blow to the head and took advantage of her. After the incident, afraid she might report him to the police, he decided not to let her go. He grabbed her throat with his hands and squeezed as hard as he could. Ali described this process in detail, explaining how he felt the crunch and sensed the pulse in her neck fade away. The girl's body lay in the basement for several days. If the search team had looked into his storage area during this time, they would have immediately uncovered the perpetrator, but no one suspected anything, and once bar. The commotion had died down. He wrapped the body in an old rug and disposed of it in a garbage bin, which went directly to the landfill. Ali's confessions were recorded on a camera installed in Cora's car. By the evening of that same day, he was taken into. Unfortunately, the girl's remains were never found, as the waste at the landfill was regularly incinerated. Her body was essentially cremated. The trial and verdict. The hearings in this case lasted another 2.5 years before a final verdict was delivered. The criminal adamantly denied any wrongdoing, claiming that he had fabricated the entire story to gain Cora's trust. In reality, he planned to rescue his girlfriend by turning in his friend to the police as soon as he received the money. No additional evidence was found besides the criminal's own confession. However, his detailed and vivid account was enough to convince the jury of his guilt. In March 2020, nearly 14 years after Joradzina's disappearance, Ali K was sentenced to life imprisonment with no possibility of ever being released. His wife Malik never believed in her husband's guilt, convinced that he had implicated himself while pursuing a noble cause. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This harrowing tale unfolded in North America, with Mexico City as its backdrop. The central figure in this story is Alejandra Lafuente, a resident of Mexico City. Alejandra is described as having striking brunette hair with bright brown eyes that highlight her thick, black lashes. She had a fit and athletic build, which she diligently maintained through fitness routines, yoga, and breathing exercises. Alejandra took great pride in her appearance and loved self-care rituals. Frequent visits to beauty salons, massage sessions, and spas showcased her commitment to personal upkeep. During warm weather, she could be found lounging on the beach while engaging in scientific work. On cloudy days, she often visited tanning salons. It's safe to say that Alejandra had a strong sense of self-love and viewed herself as an epitome of feminine beauty. Career-wise, Alejandra also exhibited ambition and determination not to lag behind others' successes. Her father is Dr. Alberto Dente, an esteemed psychiatrist well known for his research into mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and manic disorders. Notably revered for both his scientific contributions and experiments with patients, which many view as groundbreaking, Dr. Dente's achievements set high standards for Alejandra, who aspired to attain similar levels of success. She pursued a similar path as her father. To achieve this, she enrolled at one of the top universities for psychiatry and graduated with honors. Her perseverance, resourcefulness, and extraordinary intelligence, along with her father's connections, greatly assisted her in writing and defending her thesis on manic syndrome. However, Alejandra did not later engage in psychiatry. She became drawn to the field of psychotherapy instead. With the financial support from her father, the young professional obtained a license and set up her own practice in a new business center located in the heart of the capital city. There was no shortage of clients, but Alejandra decided to focus solely on women. Women struggling with eating disorders, depression, relationship issues, and low self-esteem sought her counseling services. Alejandra worked diligently to help solve family problems. Yet, despite her professional success, her personal life was less fulfilling. Alejandra's first marriage ended in divorce. She had 2 charming girls who inherited their mother's eyes and their father's sense of humor. Despite the failed marriage, Alejandra was not discouraged. To her, having 2 children was not a reason to neglect herself or give up on finding happiness again. She still aspired to meet a man who could be both an ideal partner for her and a good father figure for her daughters. Sometime after their separation, Alejandra's ex-husband would visit their home on weekends to spend time with their daughters and assist Alejandra with household chores if necessary. These visits had become routine for the couple. On one such visit, Alejandra asked him to enter through the backyard because she claimed that the lock on the front door was jammed. The man entered as requested. Alejandra told him that their youngest daughter was bathing and asked him to join them in the bathroom without suspecting anything amiss. The man entered the bathroom and saw tape on the floor. Where was his daughter? The bathtub was filled, but no one. Suddenly, right at that very second, he sensed something was terribly wrong. His ex-wife stood behind him with a hammer in her hand. She struck him on the head with all her might, then delivered another blow. He fell instantly. A gaping hole in his skull poured blood everywhere. Later, experts determined the man had no chance to save himself. Death came almost immediately after the first blow from the heavy weapon. His eldest daughter, who unexpectedly returned early from a friend's house, witnessed this truly horrifying scene. Alejandra, it was determined, suffered from severe mental distress. She frequently directed her anger toward friends and even her husband, leaving visible scratches on his arms and neck. Housemates constantly witnessed her tantrums over seemingly nothing and erratic behavior. This time, things went out of control. The eldest daughter ran out of the house screaming for help instantly, and a neighbor rushed over to call the police squad. Alejandra was arrested and charged with murder by professionals at the station and placed in a cell where she stayed for a month until her first hearing. At trial, Alejandra denied any guilt. Her lawyers argued self-defense. According to them, her ex-husband was intensely jealous of Alejandra and falsely accused her of bringing men into the house, delusions that could affect their little girl's psyche negatively. She said that he showed up unexpectedly at his ex-wife's house, sneaking through the back door to catch her with another man. When he found Alejandra in the bathroom, he allegedly pounced on her and she had to defend herself, resulting in 2 blows to his head. On June 14, 2012, the sentence was handed down. Considering the evidence presented by the defense and the presence of 2 minor children, Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months. Thanks to the coordinated work of lawyers and the financial support of her father, the term bars was replaced with a suspended sentence. A couple of months later, an appeal was filed again with a request to drop the charges with by. The argument is assault in self-defense. Human rights activists felt deep sympathy for Alejandra, portrayed at trial as a victim of domestic violence. As a result, the court reviewed the case anew and handed down an acquittal. Following her release, Alejandra continued her psychological counseling. She also maintained an image as a victim of gender inequality, fighting for her rights, just like many women in North America do. Ultimately, this portrayal made Alejandra even more popular among potential clients. Soon after, Maria Alejandra met Alan Carrera, a prominent Mexican businessman and son of Adrian Carrera Francis. Alan was tall and handsome with a statuesque stature. His father had been head of special services for the Central District and achieved considerable success in his career. Quickly, Alan expanded his business, creating a chain of construction stores that popped up all over the country. However, not all parts of Alan's business were above board. Some aspects were deeply entwined with criminal activities, which led to his father's removal from his position after one financial fraud incident was uncovered. Additionally, Alan had ties with a criminal group engaged in transporting psychotropic substances to the United States. The base for this illicit operation was located in a border town and guarded by bribed police officers. This group controlled a significant portion of psychoactive substance trafficking in the South. Evidence finally tied Alan's father to these illegal activities. Under pressure during interrogation, he gave a statement implicating himself and faced a potential 20-year prison sentence due to these revelations. On July 18, 2000, Adrian Carrera was released early. Following his release, he dedicated all his time to his son and legitimate business. His son grew up quickly, adopting his father's views and experiences. After graduating from college, Alan Carrera decided to follow in his father's footsteps and Alan showed a keen interest in a household appliance store. Despite his young age, he managed it entirely on his own. While it wasn't as large as his father's enterprise, It generated substantial revenue. Alan was always surrounded by many admirers, but he had been in love with a classmate since childhood and eventually married her. She was intelligent, beautiful, and from a respectable family. Their marriage was brief yet eventful. They had a lovely daughter together. However, the demands of work and Alan's frequent absences led to their divorce. The separation was extremely difficult for him, as he had loved her since high school. Subsequent relationships failed to bring him joy, leading to feelings of loneliness and sadness that resulted in excessive drinking. Alan developed a harmful habit as he tried various ways to cope with his prolonged depression and affinity for alcohol, attending meetings. Eventually, fate brought him to renowned psychiatrist Dr. Alberto. Interestingly enough, Dr. Alberto was the father of Maria Alejandra, Alan's ex-wife, who was also navigating through a challenging divorce herself. Despite their separation, she couldn't allow herself to be close to anyone else either. Maria Alejandra also sought counseling from a therapist. However, Dr. Alberto explained that ethically he could not treat both her and Alan simultaneously. He recommended she see another professional therapist without disclosing that this therapist would be Alejandra, his daughter. He was described as a pleasant man and quite wealthy. Without much thought, Alejandra asked her client to bring her ex-husband for another consultation. According to the therapist, she could resolve their issue in a single session and break the strong bond between the former spouses. From the first moments of the confidential session, Alejandra began implementing her plan to seduce the entrepreneur. The results were immediate. Right after the session, Alan invited the therapist for a cup of coffee to discuss family problems. Quite rapidly, an affair developed between them. Soon enough, Alan's ex-wife discovered their relationship and was shocked. She even considered reporting the incident to the doctor's ethics committee, but ultimately did not. Alejandra, being a very competent specialist, managed to convince her client to let go of her jealousy and move on from her former spouse. As a result, Alan's ex-wife decided not to file any complaints and discontinued their sessions. Meanwhile, Alan and Alejandra's relationship progressed quickly. A few months after their first date, they decided to move in together. 2 months later, they decided to formalize their relationship. However, Alan had no inkling of his fiancée's hidden secrets or the reasons behind her divorce from her ex-husband. In April 2014, Alan decided to visit his parents over a weekend and used the opportunity to talk about his beloved and their upcoming wedding. Alan's parents were extremely surprised by this news so late in the process. They had never heard of Alejandra before, which struck them as very unusual. A week after meeting with his parents, Alan and Alejandra registered their marriage. Interestingly though, Alejandra asked her husband not to invite friends and relatives. No invitations were sent out at all. The wedding was intended to be modest due to budget constraints, which did not permit inviting everyone they would have liked. However, as it turned out later, the bride's father did attend the marriage ceremony. Initially, the young couple's life seemed like a fairy tale, full of happiness and numerous plans and desires. But this didn't last long. Alejandra couldn't conceal her hysterical character, which foreshadowed the horrifying conclusion of this story that no one anticipated. The relationship between the newlyweds began to change dramatically. Alan was a rather secretive person and didn't share details of his personal life with friends. Consequently, little was known about what happened behind their closed doors. Nonetheless, it became evident that their former relationship had developed significant cracks, and the couple no longer appeared as happy as they once were. After meeting Alejandra, Alan distanced himself from his family. The final quarrel was the wedding to which his parents were not invited. After this event, they even ceased calling each other. Alan's remaining friends noticed that his spouse grew increasingly nervous and sometimes behaved inadequately, quickly losing her temper. Following a few such incidents, Alan felt deeply ashamed and decided to minimize joint meetings. Quarrels in the family occurred daily and were almost always unfounded. One evening, according to her own testimony, Alejandra decided to go through her husband's cell phone and discovered correspondences with several women containing inappropriate content. Understandably, it was impossible for her to ignore such things. Alejandra reported in court that her husband beat her, insulted her, and humiliated her in every possible way. When she discovered his infidelity as well, saving the marriage seemed pointless. For reasons unknown, Alejandra did not pursue traditional methods of psychotherapy to try and salvage the relationship. Instead, consumed by thoughts of her husband's cheating, she resolved to deal with Alan using a method already familiar to her. Once she made this decision, all her attention focused on devising a perfect murder plan. While Alan went about his regular, measured routine, he remained oblivious to the looming events. He communicated infrequently with his family. However, he couldn't ignore the annual feast celebrating his grandfather's birthday. As expected, Alan attended the event. Nevertheless, his parents made it clear that his wife wasn't welcome in their home. This situation upset Alejandra and worsened the couple's relationship. On October 31, 2014, Alan's phone last sent a text confirming he had arrived home safely after the party. From that moment on, his absence extended to his work too. This was highly unusual because Alan was known for his dedication to work. He hadn't missed work before, especially with an important store launch approaching where his presence was crucial. The cause of this sudden disappearance lay in Alejandra's horrifying plan executed after Alan's return from the celebration. Following a fierce argument, she spiked his milk with a powerful sleeping pill before suffocating him with a pillow. Alejandra watched as Alan struggled unsuccessfully to remove the pillow and catch his breath. After that, Alejandra dragged Alan's body to their neighbor's garden to retrieve an electric saw. Bearing a grim smile, she dismembered her husband's body into pieces. She then bagged the remains and ensured no identifying features remained by removing fingers and teeth. It was these details that would help the investigation in identifying the individual if the body was discovered. Alejandra packed all the bags into suitcases to transport the corpse out of the house without drawing suspicion. However, she did not succeed. As dawn approached, Alejandra could not leave the house with the suitcase unnoticed. An elderly neighbor who suffered from insomnia watched her from her window. She found the young woman's early departure and strange behavior. Additionally, for some reason, Alejandra's husband did not help lift the heavier suitcases, which added to her strange behavior as she continually looked around. At dawn, Alejandra returned home, which further surprised the vigilant neighbor. As it later turned out, Alejandra had scattered bags containing her ex-husband's remains across different neighborhoods to cover her tracks. The following day, she resumed her normal life. On November 6, 2014, police officers in Mexico City made a gruesome discovery. Human remains were found in a vacant lot near the city's outskirts. A few days later, bags containing arms and legs were located in various parts of the capital. The most chilling detail was the absence of fingers from these limbs. Teams of officers were quickly assembled and they methodically combed through the streets. Their primary objective was to locate the head and other missing parts of the victim and prevent further atrocities from occurring. Despite their efforts, the fingers and head were never found. However, by forensic experts, it was determined that all discovered remains belonged to the same individual. Sadly, without fingers or teeth, identifying this person proved impossible. To divert suspicion from herself, Alejandra began sending messages to Alan's relatives. Her aim was to avert suspicion. However, she only aggravated matters. Unbeknownst to her, Alan had recently distanced himself from his family and had no contact with his relatives. Alejandra informed Alan's parents that they were going on vacation and would be out of reach. This plan quickly unraveled when Alberto, Alejandra's father, began making phone calls to Alan's father's house. Alberto sought to find out if his son-in-law's family had any idea of Alejandra's whereabouts. He hadn't heard from her in some time, and the family was quite worried about missing their counseling sessions. Later, Alberto reached out to Alan's relatives again. This time, he informed them that his daughter had been located, but had to be forcibly admitted to a clinic. She was suffering from depression due to her husband's infidelity. This news deeply alarmed the relatives, leading them to search for Alan without success. Subsequently, Alan's family turned to the police for help. Laboratory experts decided they needed to compare the remains recently discovered with Alan's characteristics. The resemblance was 100%. His relatives also identified him without a doubt. This was particularly hard on Alan's grandfather. Soon after the identification, he fell ill with heart disease, as Alan was his only grandson. The investigation team obtained a search warrant for Alan's home and office. They discovered a patch of freshly disturbed earth in the backyard. Upon digging, they found human fingers and teeth. Alejandra was immediately apprehended. More blood traces were found in one of the rooms, as well as on the trunk of a car and in the garage. Initially, Alejandra denied any involvement, hoping she could escape punishment as she reportedly had with her previous husband. However, investigators quickly pieced together the case. An elderly witness provided critical testimony. Her timeline matched Alan's estimated time of death. It came to light that Alejandra used her job to obtain a powerful sleeping pill, a medication typically accessible only to medical professionals, which further implicated her in the crime. The evidence linked Alejandra directly to her husband's brutal murder. CCTV footage corroborated that Alan had entered their house but never left. Additionally, this footage confirmed that suitcases were later removed from the house. On December 10, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict. Ale got life imprisonment for murder with cruelty and an attempt to hide it. Using her official position didn't help. Her father's connections and bribes couldn't save her either. All he managed was a closed trial, away from the public eye and the press. Sadly, he did it for his career. Now, hardly anyone will seek help from a specialist who raised such a ruthless monster and couldn't spot problems in his own daughter. During the trial, thoughts about the death of Alejandra's first husband popped up too. But the passage of time meant no evidence was found. There were even whispers about her father's involvement in what happened. People suspected he worked with her on these crimes out of some misguided scientific interest. Yet, no proof surfaced. After many appeals from the victim's side, her sentence changed to death. This is almost unheard of in Mexico today. Death sentences are super rare. Plus, she can't ask for a case review. Her house and property must go to the victim's family. Though, who can be comforted by that when their loved one is gone? Alejandra showed she was pragmatic and cruel. She had major mental health issues, although medical exams said otherwise. Influenced by her father and using her position, she executed her manic plans without fear. After her first crime went unpunished, which let her off the hook, Alejandra felt untouchable and kept doing evil things. Maybe Alan would still be alive if this dreadful woman hadn't been acquitted before. Don't you think justice needs to catch up faster? We can't let monsters roam free because of loopholes or failures in our system. Let's ensure people like Alejandra face consequences right away so they don't get a chance to continue their wicked ways. Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Agnès Clavina. According to official figures, more than tens of millions of people go missing year-round the world. About a third them are found alive and unharmed. Nearly half are eventually discovered deceased due to accidents or murders. Approximately 2 million individuals vanish without a trace each year. These cases often remain unresolved for many years, with the individuals found neither alive nor dead. The story Agnès Clavina garnered attention in the fall of 2014. A young and very attractive woman who was enjoying an evening out at a club with friends seemed to vanish into thin air. Everyone who might have been involved appeared to evade any responsibility. However, in 2023, 9 years after the incident, the case took an unexpected turn. Agnès Clavina was born on July 8, 1984, in Latvia's capital city, Riga. She grew up in a typical family. Agnès was the youngest of 2 daughters. Her sister Greta was only a couple of years older, leading to a close and nearly inseparable bond between them. Their parents endeavored to provide both daughters with quality education and ample opportunities to pursue their dreams. Agnes emerged as a sociable, cheerful, and very active individual from an early age. She excelled academically, engaged in sports activities, and had a wide circle of friends. Her aspirations for the future included careers linked with tourism or entertainment, passions driven by her love for travel, and her knack for organizing perfect leisure time. Furthermore, Agnes possessed striking looks and an impressive physique that garnered considerable male attention and constant compliments from admirers vying for her notice. After high school graduation, Agnes worked temporarily in the service industry while attending language courses and studying to become a tourism manager. At age 20, she decided to leave her homeland and relocate to London, often referred to as the Foggy Albion. She believed relocating would open up more prospects and opportunities to develop her full potential and talents. In London, she sought to build on her ambition, fueled by greater professional opportunities and cultural experiences unavailable in Latvia. Her parents and older sister didn't oppose her decision. They supported her sincerely. Soon after the move, the beautiful blonde met a young man named Michael Mills. He was 8 years older than Agnes, had a good education, and owned a thriving business. Michael had opened a small movie theater and entertainment complex. He was considered very successful. Agnes and Michael quickly found common ground and began dating. Michael courted Agnes beautifully, giving her expensive gifts. They traveled together and made ambitious plans for their future. The couple seemed truly in love and happy. According to those close to Agnes, this was her first true love. She appeared radiant beside Michael and dreamed of becoming his lawful wife soon. In 2014, Agnes was offered a 3-month labor contract as an administrator at one of the largest, most popular nightclubs in Marbella, Spain. Naturally, this job implied moving temporarily to another country. However, the ambitious young woman didn't want to miss this opportunity at all. Michael couldn't leave everything behind to go with her because of his job, but he wasn't against her accepting the contract. For Agnes, it was a chance to try herself in a new field of activity, gain invaluable experience, and possibly develop further in this direction. Marbella is renowned as one of the most famous and attractive resorts on the Mediterranean coast. Vacationers from different parts of the world come here, mostly wealthy people, seeking fun and looking to spend money. One frequently encounters show business stars, as well as famous athletes and businessmen. Agnes, who has always been very sociable, enjoyed working in such an environment. Before moving, she visited her family in Latvia to inform them that she had signed a favorable employment contract for 3 months. She and Michael were planning their marriage. Dad, Mom, and her sister were genuinely happy for Agnes and wished her luck. At the end of May 2014, Agnes packed only the essentials for 1 season and went to work in sunny Spain. Her lover stayed in London, but they called each other daily and communicated via video link, sharing everything that was happening in their lives. Agnes actively maintained her profiles on various popular social networks. She posted daily photos, small videos, and stories. She garnered many followers who closely followed her activities and work. It was evident that Agnes was living an engaging and busy life that she enjoyed every day. After the end of her employment contract, she decided to remain in Spain for a couple more months. It was the beginning of the velvet season at the resort, which presented an opportunity to earn good money. She consulted her boyfriend about this decision. He supported her and promised to visit because they had missed each other. Agnes quickly secured a job as a hostess in a high-end restaurant and renewed her lease. Michael visited her in September as planned. They enjoyed their time together, planned their wedding, and chose a honeymoon destination. Less than a week later, Michael returned to London while Agnes continued working in Spain for another month. She planned to visit her relatives before flying back to England to reunite with her lover. Sadly, these plans were not destined to be fulfilled. On September 6th, Agnes went with friends to a popular nightclub on the Costa del Sol. A few hours earlier, she had informed her fiancé of her plans. He did not object to Agnes enjoying herself with friends. They had fun, took pictures together, which Agnes posted on her online profile that night. According to those who saw her on that fateful evening, she wore a stunning short dress and carried a tiny white clutch handbag. Toward morning, as the friends were preparing to go home, Agnes mentioned she planned to stay a little longer and then take a cab. She was always quite serious and responsible, and she hadn't had much to drink. So her companions saw no reason for concern at that moment. When the friends said goodbye and headed for the exit, Agnes was talking to a man who had bought her a cocktail and appeared eager to gain her favor. After that night, Agnes was never seen again. It seemed as though she had simply vanished into the crowded nightclub. No one could recall what time or with whom the blonde left the establishment or where she went afterward. The next day, Agnes did not show up at work. When attempts to contact her were made, it became clear that her phone was switched off. Concerned colleagues and friends were the first to raise the alarm, but found that the police were slow to respond to their report of a missing person. Toward evening, a worried Michael called Agnes's mother. He explained that he had been unable to reach his fiancée all day, a situation that had never occurred before. The following day, Agnes's parents and Michael jointly tried to contact the Spanish police to report her disappearance. However, they were informed that relatives had to file such a report in person for it to be considered. After hearing this, Michael and Agnes's family took the next flight to Marbella. In the end, the missing persons report was filed by them 5 days after Agnes disappeared without a trace. The first place checked was the apartment Agnes had rented. It appeared as though she had simply stepped out briefly and would return soon. Documents, money, and some expensive pieces of jewelry remained in place. The refrigerator was stocked with prepared food items, and on her bed lay several outfits from which she seemingly chose what she wore on her last night out. It became evident that Agnes hadn't returned home since going out with friends. Her phone was turned off. She left no posts on social media and did not respond to any messages. It wasn't until then that the police started looking into Agnes's disappearance, but unfortunately, precious time had already been lost. Friends and family of Agnes began putting up flyers around the city with her picture, asking for help in locating her. The media picked up the story. Her images featured on television news and made it to the front pages of local newspapers. The leads and clues emerged after police examined footage from CCTV cameras, both inside and outside the entertainment venue. However, there were issues because by then, all files had been erased. Authorities needed specialists and assistants to retrieve them. Their efforts weren't wasted because a camera at the exit to the parking lot showed Agnes around 6 a.m. leaving the club with a man, and it was clear this wasn't of her own accord. This last footage showing Agnes alive was scrutinized in detail. The closer experts looked, the more alarming it appeared. Agnes was being led by a large man, and it was evident she was walking under duress since he held her tightly by the waist. She appeared scared, attempted to break free several times, and spoke emotionally, but the man persistently directed her towards the parking lot, where he practically forced her into his Mercedes A63. When this large man pushed her into the car, another man was already inside while he moved towards the driver's seat. Agnes managed to open the car door trying to escape, but at that moment, a doorman nearby intervened as instructed by a gesture from the driver. The doorman pushed her back into the car before receiving an apparent cash reward from the driver for his assistance. Approximately 6 minutes after Agnes entered the vehicle, her phone was switched off and hasn't been turned on since then. Tracking further movement of the vehicle proved impossible due to lack of CCTV coverage along their route. It became obvious that these men were likely among those who last saw Agnes before she went missing. The case was shrouded in secrecy from the outset. Everyone involved in the investigation signed non-disclosure agreements, and information was tightly controlled. Not only was the press kept at bay, but even Agnes's loved ones received almost no updates. For the first few months, her parents and fiancé were left in the dark. They were simply told that an investigation was underway and that it too early to draw any conclusions. Given that Agnes not communicated in this period, there was little hope she was still alive. Michael periodically gave interviews pleading for assistance to find his fiancée. However, no responses to his appeals were forthcoming. It wasn't until 6 months later that relatives were shown footage from club cameras and provided with the names of the 3 men last seen with Agnes. The large man who forcibly took Agnes out of the club and pushed her into a car was identified as Wesley Capper, the son of a well-known and influential British millionaire. In the passenger seat sat his longtime associate Craig Porter, who had no particular occupation and frequently appeared on police radar. The third individual was a doorman named Shion Usman. Both Porter and Usman stated under interrogation that they were innocent, asserting that Agnes had entered the car willingly. According to Capper, he and his friend noticed a beautiful blonde woman at the club and approached her to introduce themselves. They claimed she was already fairly drunk, contradicting her friend's statements, but didn't refuse a drink when offered one by Capper. Wesley then suggested continuing the party at his luxurious country house, an invitation Agnes allegedly accepted. However, they asserted that while en route, Agnes changed her mind about attending Wesley's party and asked to be dropped off in the middle of their journey, saying she would take a cab home instead. The man asserted that he had dropped the passenger off at her requested location, an unlit stretch of road. This area notably lacked CCTV cameras. Craig Porter, however, could neither confirm nor deny Wesley Capper's words. According to his confession, he was also very drunk and unaware of when or how Agnes was in their car. He mentioned falling asleep immediately after departing the parking lot. The third suspect, doorman Sean Usman, corroborated that Agnes Kavina appeared intoxicated but could not state whether she entered the car voluntarily. He did confirm that when the car came to a stop, she opened the door and nearly fell out due to her condition. At the driver's request, Usman closed the door and received a substantial tip for his actions. When questioned about whether the woman's actions suggested an escape attempt, he indicated he did not believe so and attributed it to her intoxication. He added that Agnes neither screamed nor sought help. Footage later surfaced showing Wesley Capper leading Agnes into the car by her waist and wrist with considerable force. His defense was that Agnes felt dizzy and he was simply holding her to prevent a fall. Subsequent investigation uncovered another curious yet disturbing video from Soto Grande in southern Spain at the port of Puerto de la Dua. This footage featured John Capper's luxury yacht being moored there. John Capper is a millionaire and father of one of the suspects. Dated September 10th, 4 days after Agnes's disappearance, it shows Wesley, Craig, and 2 other men boarding the yacht carrying a large suitcase, which appeared quite heavy, as well as a rolled-up carpet. Upon their return to Puerto de la Dua a few days later, they had no luggage with them. He claimed that he and his friends had sailed to Ibiza to have fun. The suitcase, he said, contained their belongings, and what the investigation mistook for a carpet was actually bedding. Where it all subsequently went, he could not explain. A thorough search of Wesley's yacht and automobile yielded no results, as both had been cleaned and dry cleaned, as health destroying any traces of DNA. However, a long blonde hair was found in the trunk of the car, but it was not possible to establish its origin because this crucial evidence mysteriously evaporated during the investigation. At the trial, the prosecution highlighted another curious detail. A few hours after Agnes was in the defendant's car, Capper called emergency services several times, but each time dropped the call without waiting for an answer. He appeared afraid or uncertain about his actions. The man himself explained that he was drunk and made the calls randomly. The lawyer for the Klavan family stated that Agnes, in his opinion, was long dead and that her body was resting somewhere on the seabed in the very suitcase that the suspects had brought aboard the yacht. In addition, he believed that the case was deliberately delayed and that criminals had plenty of time to get rid of all evidence proving their guilt. Only a year and a half after Agnes's disappearance did Capper, Porter, and Usman find themselves in court. They were accused of holding Agnes against her will and forcing her into a car. Unfortunately, due to a lack of evidence, there was nothing more to charge them with. Moreover, even though many believed otherwise, the millionaire and his friend were released on bail and quietly left the courtroom. Naturally, Agnes's relatives were outraged by this decision, but the judge remained adamant. All three men were brought to trial again in 2019, almost 5 years after Agnes's disappearance. They still denied their guilt and insisted that Kavina had gotten into their car of her own free will. The prosecutor asked for Usman to be considered an accomplice to the crime because he helped drive away the victim. Usman could have received a sentence of 5 years in prison. He delivered a passionate speech, stating that he was among the suspects due to the color of his skin and the lack of opportunity to hire a good lawyer. The money he earned? It was sent to a starving family in Africa. Capper's and Porter's lawyers argued that their clients were only guilty of persuading Agnes to get into the car, not of forcing her. In their view, the young woman was dropped off on the road as she had requested. While waiting for a cab to go home, she could have been kidnapped and killed by third parties, given that Agnes was drunk and unable to offer much resistance. The judge's verdict surprised and angered the relatives of the missing young woman because none of the defendants were punished meaningfully. Usman was cleared of all charges. Capper received a sentence of 2 years for taking advantage of Agnes's drunken state to persuade her to get into his car. Porter received 6 months for complicity. In reality, neither man spent a single day in prison as their sentences were suspended. They paid Agnes's family £101,000 in compensation, a sum her family found ridiculous. Discouraged by the decision, Agnes's family appealed. During this time, both defendants managed to break the law once again. Capper, under the influence of alcohol and drugs, knocked down a woman and fled the scene. Porter and his friend, also drunk, stole a car after beating its owner severely. Despite these serious crimes, Capper received only probation due to the expertly crafted defense by his lawyers. He paid substantial compensation to the family of the woman who died under his car's wheels and remained at large. Porter was less fortunate this time and ended up going to jail. There's no information available publicly about the sentence received in 2021, almost 7 years after Agnes's disappearance. The prime suspect, Wesley, had been living a rather immoral lifestyle, indulging in alcohol and illicit substances. This severely impacted his health. Just when he thought he had overcome the illness, he suffered a stroke. Wesley died on July 26, 2021, at the age of 44. At that time, Agnes's parents filed another appeal with the court. However, since the suspect is deceased, prosecution is no longer feasible. Regardless of what the Supreme Court decides in this challenging case, there was an unexpected twist 9 years later. Although Agnes Kavina was never found, dead or alive, she was presumed dead eventually. Subsequently, her parents, sister, and fiancé concurred with their lawyer's theory that criminals had placed Agnes's body in a suitcase and disposed of it into the sea from a yacht to ensure it wouldn't be discovered. In the summer of 2023, exactly 9 years after Agnes vanished without a trace, the case took another unexpected turn. In mid-June of that year, a gardener working at one of the elite golf clubs in Costa del Sol discovered something unusual near the coast while cleaning up. Upon closer inspection, it turned out to be an old and badly damaged suitcase. Hesitant to open it himself, he called the police. Inside this suitcase were human remains. Examinations revealed that these bones belonged to a young woman whose age at death was approximately between 25 to 35 years old. Moreover, it was determined that this suitcase, with its contents, had been submerged underwater for about 10 years before being washed ashore. After piecing together all available information, police hypothesized that this body could belong to none other than Agnes Kavina, who disappeared 9 years ago. To verify this assumption conclusively requires several examinations comparing Agnes's DNA with those remains found in the suitcase. At present moment, experts are meticulously working on establishing these facts. However, details surrounding this investigation have not yet been made public. Should their suspicions be validated, It would provide grounds for reopening the case and pursuing legal action against any surviving suspects involved in her demise. Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Tristan Borlase. On April 10, 2019, a significant tragedy occurred involving 17-year-old Tristan Borlase. This teenager, from a devout family, violently attacked and killed his relatives at their home in Deep Gap, North Carolina. On that Wednesday evening, emergency services received a call from a young woman. She reported a large amount of blood in her home and mentioned that her parents and younger brother were missing. Attempts to reach them had been unsuccessful. Police officers immediately responded to the situation, driving to the family home in Deep Gap, located near the Watauga and Wilkes County border. Upon arrival, they discovered blood on the walkway leading to the house, on the mat by the front door, and trailing inside up the stairs. As officers searched outside the home, they found a man's body covered with leaves under a hammock. The man had multiple stab wounds. Later that night, at about 10:30 p.m., authorities found the family's pickup truck concealed in the woods. Inside was the woman's body covered with a blanket and bags of mulch placed on top of her. Jeffrey Borlase, Tristan's father, was born on April 16, 1975. He served as pastor of Pist Bible Fellowship Church, a conservative Protestant movement with Mennonite roots. Tristan grew up in an environment emphasizing personal piety and constant awareness of God's watchful eye. Serious Bible study sessions and moral instructions formed the basis of his upbringing. Even entertainment like laughter or colorful clothing was frowned upon within this community. Things such as good works, charity, missionary work, love for one's enemies, and renunciation of all forms of violence were highly valued virtues. Jeffrey upheld these principles as well, since he was raised under similar circumstances by Pastor Harry Boras. As a boy and young man, Jeffrey exemplified kindness, gentleness, and patience. During his youth as a young adult man, Jeffrey worked at Big Surf Water Park located on Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri during summer breaks from schooling routines back then. On his first day of work, the young man encountered a charming and meek girl named Tanya Mae Trandom. She was of the same age, had similar views, and shared almost identical upbringing with him. Tanya, like Jeffrey, was raised in a family where Christian values were of utmost importance. A patient and humble girl, she saw in the devout man an ideal future husband and a caring father. She gave Jeffrey a picture of an elderly couple holding hands and remarked, "That will be us one day." Jeffrey's mother, Kathy Brown, prayed earnestly that God would bless her son with a wife who loved the Lord wholeheartedly. She believed her prayers were answered when Jeffrey met Tanya. The young couple married and continued living according to the values they were taught in their own families. The photo presented by Tanya was carefully preserved in their family album. Soon after their marriage, the couple welcomed their first child, an adorable girl named Taylor. Not long after Taylor's birth came 3 more children, the youngest being a son named Tristan. Taylor embraced her role as the eldest sibling wholeheartedly. She took care of her brothers and sisters, constantly supporting them. Among all her siblings, she had a special bond with her younger brother Tristan. Despite their age difference, they were inseparable. Jeffrey and Tanya held firm beliefs about parenting, viewing it as their mission to instill Christian values in their children's hearts. As their 4 children grew older, they decided to extend their family further by adopting 4 more boys from an orphanage. Open-hearted and loving according to others' descriptions, their family expanded to include 8 children: Taylor, twins Kay and Alexis, Misery, Ale, Stephen, Miku, and Tristan. In line with the family's religious beliefs, children were not permitted to use cell phones or social networks until reaching a certain age. They emphasized simplicity in needs and desires as well. Additionally, boys were forbidden to engage in romantic relationships until they completed high school at 18 years old. Bible study sessions and other religious activities were mandatory components of their upbringing. Despite these guidelines rooted in asceticism and discipline, the children grew up like any other boys and girls, with love and support from their devoted parents guiding them along the way. Parents made no distinction between native and adopted children. They all received the same attention, care, and affection. The loving mother fostered a harmonious atmosphere, carefully monitoring the internal relationships among brothers and sisters. She prayed frequently and engaged in various good deeds. The couple believed in nurturing virtue through their actions and instilled mercy in their children by setting an example. When a hurricane struck Haiti, Tanya sold her expensive wedding ring and donated the proceeds to a foundation dedicated to building housing for the victims. In place of her costly ring, she acquired a simple, modest one. In 2015, Taylor graduated from high school and moved to Boone to attend Appalachian State University. This event was particularly difficult for Tristan, as he lost his closest companion and found himself alone. Although Taylor returned home at every opportunity, she now had her own independent life, leaving Tristan with the same old rules and routines that he'd always opposed. Tristan had long rebelled against the restrictions his parents imposed since childhood and disagreed with their religious views. He was particularly frustrated by the lack of a cell phone and the inability to connect with peers on social networks, an integral part of modern teenage life. After Taylor's departure, quarrels with his parents increased. In December 2017, there were significant changes within the family's life. Jeffrey, his wife, and their children moved to a new house with a large lot in Deep Gap, Watauga County, North Carolina. The house was situated on a dirt road leading into a wooded area and offered much more space than their previous home. Additionally, it was located just under 2 miles from Robin's residence, Tanya's mother, and the children's grandmother, making it easy to seek her help when needed for looking after the youngest children. He attended the local high school and began participating in and field. Other kids took jobs as counselors at summer camps. At first glance, it might have seemed that there was never any trouble in the Borlas household. Over time, Tristan's behavior became troubling. In 2018, the school insisted on several consultations with a psychologist due to anger issues and a lack of control. By 2019, when Tristan was in high school, he started having trouble understanding some school subjects. These difficulties grew with each passing day. From being a diligent student who always participated in school activities before the move, he turned into an indifferent and withdrawn teenager with a lack of interest in his studies. Tristan began arriving late for lessons and showed no desire to learn at all. It got to the point where he would put his headphones on during class and sit with an absent expression. Some teachers tried to help Tristan, and he even made contact, but everything ended with unchanged indifference. At home, Tristan's behavior also became a concern. By this time, he had everything but constantly argued with his parents about his cell phone and access to social networks. He spent considerable time on the internet. On his Instagram account, he referred to himself as a musician. His sister Taylor remained interested in her siblings' lives and noticed that Tristan quarreled more frequently with their parents and argued about religious topics with their mother. She also learned of his other problems at school. The sister attempted to talk to her brother, but realized their former closeness was gone. After some time, Tristan befriended a girl from the religious community named Evelyn Faith Jackson. They began meeting without particularly observing prohibitions on intimate relations. Sometimes they even smoked forbidden substances together. Tristan expressed complaints about his mother's nightly discussions regarding his behavior, which left him feeling tired and unable to concentrate in school. The young man grew very concerned that many of his faults caused him not to live up to his mother's expectations. She can't take pride in him, told that he can be himself with his father, but it's different with his mother. On April 10, 2019, a lot of secrets from Tristan's life came to light. Surveillance cameras were installed in the barn. Tristan's old cell phone, which he occasionally used without his parents knowing, was used as an access point. On this particular day, Tanya took the phone for some reason and discovered text messages indicating her son was having inappropriate conversations with girls and discussing illegal drugs. Tristan was at school when he noticed his phone blinking with incoming messages. His shocked parents confronted him through a family chat about what they had found on the old phone. That same day, Sher King, an English teacher in Tristan's class, called his mother to complain about his grades and behavior. During the trial, it was revealed that Tanya Borlas had called Miss King back, informing her that she and her husband would soon come to the school to pick Tristan up to discuss his academic performance. Miss King conveyed this message to Tristan, who was quite surprised by the news. The couple left their youngest child with his grandmother and headed to the middle school to address these issues. The ride home was silent. At trial, Tristan testified that his mother appeared tense and frowned frequently while going through his phone. A conversation ensued at home for about an hour and a half. Afterward, Tanya texted her mother stating that although they had taken away Tristan's phone and car keys until his grades and behavior improved, he did not seem upset by this. She informed her mother that she would be coming soon to pick up the younger child. This message was sent at 4 p.m., after which it seems the discussion continued. From Tristan's account, he and his mother talked about the importance of doing well in school and maintaining cleanliness at home. He was forced to listen and realized there was a lot in him needing correction. They even made a list of qualities should develop to become a better person: compassion, honesty. This list would later be found by the police. At one point, Tristan said his mother approached him from behind, put her arm around his neck, and applied pressure. He instinctively jumped up, turned around, and accidentally her. According to him, his mother had never done anything like that before, so he reacted that way. His mother was startled by the blow, grabbed what he thought were scissors from a shelf, and moved toward her son. In shock at what was happening, he stabbed her thinking he was defending himself and ran to his father for help. Later forensic examination found no evidence on Tristan's neck, indicating his mother strangled him. During the trial, the prosecution showed photos of Tristan Borlas's neck taken by the medical examiner that displayed a broken neck bone. On the other hand, the psychologist would explain during the trial that in his opinion Tristan Borlas was mentally sane at the time of the crime, but suffered from a severely impaired cognitive state. He was experiencing depersonalization, derealization, and felt events were unreal. However, the court and jury, they would disregard the psychologist's opinion, finding Tristan to be a skillful manipulator and socially dangerous individual. According to Tristan, he did not understand what was happening, or why his father was running away from him, or why he stabbed him when he caught up even though he begged for help. He remembered his father picking up a rock saying, "Tristan, don't," but thought his father would rather let him be killed than try to harm him. Neighbors later reported hearing loud screams on the Borlas property at about 5:30 p.m. that Wednesday. After it was over, Tristan returned to the house where he vomited, indicating severe stress, not cold-blooded, calculated murder in the psychologist's opinion. The jury disagreed with the psychologist's opinion because they had seen the forensic medical examiner's reports during the trial. Jeffrey B.'s autopsy report detailed multiple stab wounds to his left chest back, slash wounds his arms and hands, and abrasions his skull and forehead. Tanya Borlas's autopsy report showed that she had multiple wounds in her left chest and arm, while as injuries likely sustained from neck compression. These findings suggested that the parents were defending themselves rather than attacking. Tristan had an opportunity to escape from his mother if he felt threatened. Even if the mother experienced a sudden lapse of judgment or misperceived self-defense, the father's murder and subsequent actions appeared different. Tristan returned home, removed his mother's body, placed it in a truck under a tarp, cleaned the crime scene for about an hour, and even used a hose to wash down the porch. Around 8:30 p.m., Tristan went to his grandmother's house to pick up his younger brother. His brother Robin thought this was very strange. Tristan explained that his parents urgently needed to go to the store, and apologized for not having time to stop by to pick up his brother. About 20 minutes later, Robin received a call from another grandson who complained that their parents were not answering the phone and hadn't come to pick him up from work as usual. Grandma called Alexis and asked her to retrieve her brother. They agreed to meet at Jeffrey and Tanya's house to figure out what had happened. When they arrived at the house, Robin noticed blood on the porch, but wasn't overly concerned since the couple raised animals there. She went inside to get a flashlight to check on them and discovered blood everywhere. At this point, Alexis ran into the house reporting she found some kind of body under a hammock near the animal barn and thought she saw Tristan with blood on his face in a getaway car. Alexis called emergency services. The operator instructed her and all family members to lock themselves in the car and wait for the police. The police arrived 10 minutes later. After several hours of waiting outside and talking to officers, they were taken to the station where they were informed that Jeffrey and Tanya Barassi had been found dead. While examining the crime scene, detectives found a computer interface in the home. It connected the video surveillance system inside the house to the monitors. Detectives saw a screen with a grid of various cameras broadcasting live video feeds. They immediately requested a warrant to obtain credentials from the servicing company. Meanwhile, Tristan contacted his girlfriend Evelyn and went over to her home. She noticed he seemed worried and had a few scratches on his forehead and arms. Tristan assured her that he had only argued with his parents and got the scratches while playing with his dog. Evelyn described Tristan's injuries: 3 scratches on his forehead, a wound on his hand, a cut on his finger, and a bruised fingernail. Right after the crime, Tristan posted a photo of his injuries on Snapchat, saying he was hurt by his father's dog. According to Evelyn, this photo matched what she saw that evening. Tristan stayed over that night. The next morning, they went to Walmart and McDonald's, but decided against going to school. Evelyn thought Tristan just wanted some time away from his parents, so she suggested staying with one of her relatives for a while. He agreed, and they traveled to another state. On April 11th, Sheriff's Office personnel obtained the username and password to the Barassi home's video surveillance system. After reviewing the camera footage, they learned about the circumstances of the crime. Police obtained a warrant for Tristan's arrest and turned over details about their vehicle. He allegedly drove away to the National Crime Information Center. A search of the car began, and soon after, a chase ensued. Investigator Matthew received intel that Tristan had been spotted in Tennessee and quickly began the paperwork necessary to catch the alleged perpetrator. He requested Robin, Tristan's grandmother, to accompany him during the apprehension so he could speak to Tristan in her presence due to his young age. As they were driving with Evelyn, Tristan noticed blue lights trailing them. He accelerated and told his friend that his parents must have registered the car as stolen to locate him. Speeding down the highway, he tried to evade capture, but eventually pulled over when he couldn't escape his pursuers any longer. The Ford was quickly surrounded by police cars. Evelyn was utterly confused upon witnessing her boyfriend being handcuffed and taken away in a squad car. The officers observed that Tristan did not appear particularly upset or agitated. On April 11, 2019, investigator Matthew conducted an interview with Tristan. It was both videotaped and audio recorded. The young man answered all questions, confessed to the crime, and detailed his actions in full, occasionally breaking into tears. Tristan Boras, who was just a month shy of his 18th birthday, was taken into custody without bail. Shortly thereafter, the sheriff's office secured a warrant to search Tristan's Snapchat account, along with 5 cell phones that could contain pertinent information related to the crime. Another warrant was issued for the Orchard Road home, where detectives discovered another phone in the master bedroom, alongside various items including a keyboard, pen from a safe, paper cups, hammer, straw, knives, red-stained swab eyeglasses, kitchen towel hammock, digital video recorder, rug, and miscellaneous papers, South Dakota cards, boots. According to court documents, a search warrant was also issued for the Ford F-150 truck, where investigators seized a red-stained swab laptop, top computer charger, and steering wheel cover. Additionally, authorities obtained a warrant to search the home of Tristan's girlfriend in Boone since he had spent the night at her house. Court documents state that a pillowcase, a zippered sweatshirt, and a notebook were seized from the property. The findings from the investigations and searches enabled investigators to piece together the chronology of events in great detail. The claim of self-defense was found to be untenable. Funeral services for the couple took place on April 17, 2019, at Bible Fellowship Church, with pastors William C.R. and Brad Gray officiating the ceremony. The children, grappling with the loss of their parents at such a young age, managed to write an emotive obituary. "Our parents never got the opportunity to live for themselves because they always lived for us. Jeff and Tanya have always brought immense joy and pride to their parents. Our parents made the world a better place, and we aim to continue that legacy by passionately loving people and pursuing faith." After the funeral, Taylor visited her brother in prison for the first time and was taken aback by his demeanor. Tristan showed no remorse and attempted to lay blame on the family for the incident. To his sister, it appeared he believed he would regain his freedom eventually. Disgusted, Taylor left. Her second visit was on May 11th for Tristan's birthday, accompanied by Grandma Robin. However, this meeting fared no better than the last. Her brother boasted about a party thrown for him in prison to celebrate his birthday, a behavior Taylor found unacceptable considering their parents' tragic death. Following this visit, the family decided to sever all contact with Tristan. The trial began on February 16, 2022. During proceedings, Tristan expressed regret for what had transpired and concurred with everything his family had said about him. He supported a permanent ban on contact to ensure his family's sense of safety. On March 3rd, Tristan Bohr was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for each count of first-degree murder. Judge Horn noted that mental health issues were considered as somewhat mitigating factors during sentencing. According to the psychologist's report, Tristan Borlas continues to suffer from anxiety, depression, and exhibits symptoms consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. However, Judge Horn noted that the psychologist found no indication of psychotic disorders. Although the anxiety and depression may have been exacerbated by continued drug use, what's particularly unusual in this case is that neither Tristan's family, nor his lawyer, nor he himself provided any statements about his motives behind the crime. Here we have a perplexing situation. A devout family with a socially dangerous individual who abused illegal drugs and couldn't fully grasp or articulate the reasons for his actions. On one hand, there's a young man with low self-esteem who exhibits symptoms of anxiety and hasn't received adequate medical care. During the court session, it was mentioned that his mother helped him cope with panic attacks since she experienced them herself. One foundational principle of certain educational theories posits that children burdened with original sin are inherently immoral from birth. Therefore, education must correct them by imposing strict discipline and suppressing their self-awareness. This so-called strict love is supposedly beneficial for children. Tristan might have had an inherited overreactivity of the nervous system and grew up under stringent limits, constantly feeling inadequate as a devout individual. Some require more love, while others require less. According to recollections shared by his older sister, Tristan was intensely jealous of new siblings who diverted parental attention away from him. Initially rebellious, he then sank into depression and feelings of worthlessness, compounded by illicit drug use and subsequent panic attacks, as well as depersonalization, derealization states. He couldn't embrace his parents' devotion to their faith and couldn't meet his mother's expectations or align with what she envisioned for him, which required correction. Instead of securing a competent therapist's assistance as needed, changes were listed together by him and his mother. This approach may have missed critical opportunities to address underlying issues. Could this senseless and tragic event have been avoided in a truly loving family? That remains uncertain, a question echoic in the aftermath.